So if we could get a little quiet. Let's see, Mayor, you know how to quiet the room, right?
All right, we're live? All right, we're live. It's up to you, Eric.
Okay. Welcome to the 2017 Tacoma Voice, Tacoma Radio Election Forum. My name is Eric Bond. As we approach the anniversary of the 2016 presidential election, many people are thinking about divisions in this country and how those divisions affect our community. And many residents of Tacoma Park have spent the last 12 months thinking about how national issues reverberate in local communities. Many folks have worried about changes in national policies, and many have banded together to take action. In this city of less than 18,000 people, we are fortunate to participate in democracy at its most fundamental level. This was recently emphasized in a city council meeting that went until 2 a.m. as Tacoma Park residents exercised their right to petition their government. Justice Thurgood Marshall said this: "Where you see wrong or inequality or injustice, speak out, because this is your country, this is your democracy. Make it, protect it, pass it on." Tonight, we will be holding a conversation with all of the candidates for Tacoma Park Mayor and City Council. Time will be limited in order to include all races. However, this is an opportunity for each candidate to explain to residents why she or he is the best choice for the position at this time. I urge all viewers and listeners to seek out opportunities to meet their potential representatives prior to the election on November 7th. Before we begin, I also want to acknowledge the fantastic crew at Tacoma Park City TV for once again providing television and audio coverage of this event. And I want to thank our ever-energetic City Clerk, Jesse Carpenter, for helping to set this up. This is the order in which we will proceed this evening. First, I'll be speaking with Mayor Kate Stewart, who is running unopposed. And in fact, for the first hour, I'll be talking to candidates who are running unopposed for their seats. The mayor will be followed by Ward 1 current council member Peter Kovar, who is once again running for office. Casey Kostiak, the Ward 3 candidate who is running to replace current council member Rizzi Qureshi, and Ward 4 council member Terry Siemens, who is again running for his office. In the second hour, we will go sequentially with the talking ward by ward with the contested races, beginning with Ward 2, which includes Cindy Dybala, Joe Edgell, and Ashley Nugent. Then Ward 5, which includes Jarrett Smith and Amy Byrne, and finally Ward 6, Talisha Searcy and Jason Small. If you have a question for a candidate, you can email it to me. I have my laptop right here. It's an easy email address, talk@tacoma.com, and you know, if you get your phones out, you can send it right from your phone, and I'll be monitoring and looking for your questions. So that said, thank you, Mayor Kate Stewart, for being part of our election forum.
Great. Thank you, Eric. I'm glad to be here.
So to begin with, I'd like to just start with where you feel the city is succeeding, and in the past 2 years as mayor, what you feel are the highlights of your role as mayor.
Great. Well, thank you very much, and thank you for everyone who's here and watching at home on TV. 2 years goes by very quickly. When I started as mayor, we put in place a number of things such as our affordable housing reserve. We've piloted a project called Home Stretch, which is a down payment assistance program. We've put in place this past year a racial equity framework. And we've really increased and looked for new ways to engage residents across the community. And it's interesting how the first year differed from the second year I've been in office. This past year, since the national election, we've been spending a great deal more time reaffirming our values and pushing back against what is happening at a national level. So we've spent a great deal of time this winter upholding our values and reaffirming our status as a sanctuary city. And then when the country pulled out of the Paris Climate Agreement, we also reaffirmed our commitment to those goals. In fact, because Tacoma Park already has a sustainability manager and a 17-point plan on climate change, we were easily able to sign on to a number of the compacts that came out right after that. So I'm happy to go into more depth on any of those topics.
All right, well, we'll get to some of those. And the next question is, where do you feel the city is continuing to come up short?
So in a number of places, I think we can do much better, and that's really reaching out to different groups and constituents across the city. Low-income residents, our immigrant families, renters, a lot of these groups overlap, and it really came to light during our last city council meeting. We had a presentation by the consultants we hired to do a report on economic development and affordable housing in the city. And one of the things they reported is that 39% of renters, people who rent in our city, are what's called cost burdened. That means they spend over 30% of their annual income on rent, and 14% are severely cost burdened. That means they spend over 50% on their rent. And this is in a community where we have rent stabilization, and we try and have affordable housing. But the fact that we have 4 in 10 renters who are cost burdened is really a concern for me. And looking forward in the future, how are we going to address those folks' needs so they can stay in the community? And then also the other thing that we didn't need a report to tell us, but we also know, is that our affordable housing is concentrated in certain areas in our community. It's not dispersed around the community. And for me, that is a priority to think about. How do we make sure that our community doesn't become segregated and divided because there are certain areas where it's a higher concentration of renters or low-income residents, and then with our housing prices going up in other areas of our community, homeowners who make higher incomes.
Okay, well, as you know, to go straight to housing, rent stabilization has long been one of the, foundations of Tacoma Park policies, and I'm wondering if you feel that changes need to be made. I know that you just received, as you say, a presentation from the Housing and Economic Development Strategic Plan. Do you feel like that plan addresses affordable housing appropriately? And do you feel that there are ways that you can strengthen, specifically ways that you can strengthen rent stabilization?
Sure. So first on the report that we just received last week, the council just received the presentation last week. It's a very detailed report, and we're going to actually be holding open houses and discussions with the community upcoming in November. The dates of those are on the city website. I know one of them is going to be Election Day, so we hope people will come, discuss the report, give their feedback, and make sure they vote. And then we'll be meeting with staff, having a number of other work sessions on the city council, or I should say the new city council. We'll be having a number of work sessions to review that before we actually finalize the action steps we'll be taking. Specifically regarding rent stabilization, it's very clear to me, and this report confirmed it, that Tacoma Park does provide the affordable housing, not just in our city, not just in Montgomery County, but basically for our region. And one of the reasons that we are able to do that is because of our rent stabilization law. And so it's very important. Having said that, though, a number of our buildings are very old. Our housing stock is very old. And so we need to make sure that the landlords, those who own the buildings, are making the improvements that need to be made, because housing, we need to make sure, is not just affordable, but it's also quality housing.
And I know there's not much that the city can do about the fact that all around the city much more expensive housing is coming in, which I would imagine puts some pressure on landlords within Tacoma Park who feel like they would like to be making the rents that people just outside the city are able to make, landlords just outside the city are able to make.
And that's why having good relationships in neighboring jurisdictions, particularly if we look in the Langley Crossroads area with Prince George's County, and making sure that as the Purple Line moves forward, that we're really thinking about what can we put in place to ensure that people aren't displaced and that we make sure we have affordable housing.
All right. Well, since our time is short, let's go straight to the Tacoma Junction issue, which may be the most front burner issue for many residents in the city at the moment. Certainly has caused quite a bit of debate. And I'm wondering if you could explain your position on going forward with the plans for Tacoma Junction, and also, your response to the citizen opposition to, or the display of citizen opposition at City Council meeting.
Great. So first, I'd like to say, yesterday we had the opportunity. The Tacoma Co-op had their membership meeting, and I think it was a very good meeting. And one of the things I said at that meeting, to go to your last point, Eric, is that this project has been in the works for a number of years. And depending on the role someone has in this conversation, in this project, depending on when someone has plugged in to the conversation, everyone holds a different perspective and an understanding of the project moving forward. And there's not one person that holds this whole narrative. And so it's important for all of us to understand and move forward together, and understand that we all have the same goal, which is to create a gathering space for our community, a place where people can come, work, eat, play, enjoy seeing their neighbors, and a place where the co-op is still an integral part of the junction. And so moving forward, Wednesday night, the City Council has before it a resolution. I want to underscore that this resolution is a sense of council reacting to the concept plan that we were provided. It will detail, it's up on the website if people would like to look at it. It will detail those areas where the City Council feels the concept plan fell short in meeting the goals of the project that we have outlined in the development agreement, as well as in a number of resolutions. This is not an up-down vote on the concept plan. So the council is not accepting or rejecting the concept plan as a whole. Rather, we are providing our feedback and directing NDC, our neighborhood development company, our redevelopment partner, on what we need to see after they've done the traffic studies and when they come back to us with the draft site plan.
All right. Thank you. I have a question from the Committee on the Environment. And they want, the question is, what do you think of the sustainability budget and priorities, and what would you change or not?
Oh, okay. Sustainability budget. Well, one, I would say we have a terrific sustainability manager, Gina Mathias. She's put in place a number of terrific programs. The Neighborhood Energy Challenge, the Car Free Challenge right now, and in addition, Gina has taken opportunities and really put Tacoma Park forward on it, like our pilot project from the folks in South Korea, our streetlights that we have in front of the community center and the crosswalks. So I would say, without having the sustainability budget in front of me, I actually can't answer in detail those questions.
Okay. In order to not have a 2 a.m. meeting, we actually have a very short time together. Where could where could residents go to find out more about, your positions on the issues?
Great. So we do have a website. It's Kate Stewart for Tacoma, so they can check out that there. And in addition, people can email me. More than happy to sit down with neighbors, talk about the issues. We're doing a bunch of door knocking, and I will be at the polls for the early voting and on Election Day.
Okay. And finally, could you tell me why you are the right person to be our mayor?
Great. It has been an honor the last 2 years to be mayor here in Tacoma Park. We have put in place a number of programs and policies over the last 2 years, and I really hope the residents of Tacoma Park re-elect me so that we can work further on issues like affordable housing, racial equity framework, increasing engagement with the community.
Okay.
Can I do one plug before we go?
Well, I don't know.
No, it's on the. So one of the things that we've been doing regarding increasing engagement is starting a youth council. And we've opened up applications to it. We particularly need young people in grades 7 through 12 in wards 4 and 5. And so if people know any young person in 7th through 12th grade in wards 4 or 5, I'd ask that they apply so we make sure we have representation from those wards on the council.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Mayor.
Thank you.
And we only scratched the surface,
Yep.
but seek out the mayor and ask her your questions.
Great. Thank you, Eric.
What's that? Talk to me. Yeah. We're having a conversation. This feels a little bit like speed dating. So,
I expect a nice restaurant, please.
So Peter Kovar, you are running once again for Ward 1, and I'm wondering if we could start out with representation from you of how the past 2 years have been and what you feel are the successes
Sure.
of the city and the successes of your council position.
Sure. What's interesting is I think some of the areas where we've really done well are also areas where we're also falling short and have yet to do more, and so it's sort of two sides of the same coin. And for example, I think everybody, just about everybody I know, says I really love living in a diverse community like Tacoma Park. And we've made real strides on that, including putting more grant money into programs to benefit immigrants and those with disabilities and youth. The mayor just mentioned some of those. And we've also stood tall and proud on protecting immigrants and refugees and showing solidarity with the LGBTQ community, for example, after the shooting that happened in Florida. But by the same token, I still see a lot of people in those communities who haven't sort of seen the pathway to participate fully in the work that we do here. And so we have a lot more still to do in those areas. And for example, we have made the change in elections, so more people will be able to vote when we vote. We synchronize our elections with the presidential and gubernatorial. We still have to do more in the way of translation of documents and things like that. And so I see those both as we've made success, but we have more to go. And I think I would say the same thing is true in affordability. We did cut taxes, and we've started to make strides in addressing affordable housing, as the mayor said, but that's still, we're far from there. And on sustainability, just to give one more example, I was just at the event about a week ago where Tacoma Park got certified again through the state sustainability group, and we had the highest score. And so we're doing great, and Gina is a great staffer, as the mayor said, but I'd love to see us, for example, now that we're working toward the LED lights and the plastic bags, but let's move toward trying to find out what it would mean to be carbon neutral, either at the municipal government level or the whole city, and take other steps, disinvesting from fossil fuels. So a lot of them we've made progress, but in those very areas we still have to do more.
Okay. Well, one question that it doesn't seem like, I know that I ask every election cycle, is what your commitment is to rent stabilization specifically, and then looking at the issue of affordable housing. You represent Ward 1, and so I'm wondering if you have any thoughts on how you could include more affordable housing within your ward.
I would say a couple of things on that. Number one, whenever I speak to people in Ward 1, and Ward 1 does have the highest level of single-family homes and the highest values, everybody in the ward that I talk to is still supportive of the steps that we're taking, and the mayor talked about some of them, to set aside money for affordable housing and to try to address both at the rental and at the home ownership level. When I worked at HUD, where I was for 4 years in the administration, the Obama administration, one of the terms was the missing middle, and what that meant was that in many cases, and we're an example of this, you have a lot of rental properties, many of which are affordable. You have a lot of single-family homes, which are becoming increasingly expensive. But for that middle group, seniors who want to downsize, younger families that want to move in, it can be harder. And with the development pressure, it's going up. So the costs are going up. So I'm glad that we did set aside these funds. And on the strategic plan that the mayor mentioned that we had a presentation on before, and so I urge people to take a look at it when they can. It's on the website. One of the things that struck me was the consultant said, we're really and the mayor may have mentioned this also, we're really the provider of affordable housing in this area, but we're 17,000 people in this massive metropolis. We can't on our own, even though we're taking some steps, stop these massive forces that are causing increase in housing costs and pressing down on affordability. And so I think I'm open to some changes to rent stabilization, particularly to help landlords ensure that they can afford improvements, because I don't want people to say, well, it's affordable, but it's not in good shape. But I'd also like to reach out, and I'm planning to do this, to some of the foundations and outside organizations that deal with housing to see if we can almost get adopted by an outside group that could help us. We're this little town in the midst of this massive area, and we're doing more for affordable housing than just about anybody else. We're like a test case, and I don't want us to lose that, so I'd really like us to do that. Within Ward 1 specifically, I'd like to explore with our affordable housing whether there would be a way with accessory apartments to find some way to provide financial incentives to people who maybe their kids have moved away, they want to stay in Tacoma Park. If they agree to rent their accessory apartment to a lower income person, maybe there could be some sort of financial incentive to doing that, which would help both help seniors age in place and have further opportunities for lower income people to rent.
Okay. Now, everybody is going to get the Tacoma Junction question
Great.
tonight. And I'm interested in hearing your thoughts on the value of the TPSS Food Co-op to the community, and whether or not you feel that you would take steps in going forward with any development to ensure the continuity of the co-op.
Absolutely. I think the co-op is one of those institutions that helps form the qualities that make Tacoma Park a great place to live. There are a number of them. That's one I include in there. The library and the soccer league and Mark's Kitchen and all these kinds of institutions, some private, some public, that are what makes Tacoma Park a unique place. I think the co-op has to remain in operation, and I'm pleased that in the development agreement and the other work that we've done to get us to this point, we've consistently on the council made it clear that we want the co-op to remain in action. I was one of the council members who, not the only one, but one of the ones who fought in the development agreement to ensure that there was language that called for stronger protections for the co-op as we go forward. So to me now, where we are, and the mayor alluded to this resolution, I encourage everybody to take a look at it. That resolution basically reacts to the most recent concept plan that the developer put forward. And you mentioned that we were in here till close to 2 in the morning. That was actually a great experience to me, because there's plenty of times when we're here discussing things we think are important, and there's not a lot of folks in the audience, and I get it, people are busy, but it was great to see that many. I didn't mind staying that late. And what we heard, and what I felt before I heard that, was that there were really 3 main areas where, for me, and I think the community sensed it as well, what the developer had produced was deficient for us. There wasn't enough street-level open public space and that you could go to and benefit from without having to be a paying customer. Now, there could also be open space where there's tables too, but that's different. You sit down. Second one is the 3rd floor. I'm not convinced that the 3rd floor works. I think it might be excessive for that space. If the vote was right now, I'd say no 3rd floor. Maybe there can be further discussion on that. The third piece is, if you look at the schematic drawing, where the lay-by for truck delivery is and the outside service tables for a potential restaurant and the trash handling, all of that stuff is sort of jumbled in together in one spot in a way that's just, in the real world, it wouldn't work. And so somehow that's got to be rationalized. We have to find more open space to do that in addition to the public space. If those 3 things can be addressed, and we call for them to be addressed in the resolution, then going forward, I think, and they'll be worked out, I hope, in the context of the traffic study and then the later work on the site plan. So I hope we get there, and I hope we get something that allows the co-op to thrive, is a beautiful, welcoming place for the community, and permits the developer to make a reasonable return. Doing all three of those, there's not just a silver bullet to do it. It's sort of a winding path to get there. I can't guarantee we're going to get there, but I feel like we have a chance to get there.
All right, you're doing a great job talking fast to get through all of that material. I want to get to a couple of questions that have come in from our audience out there in TV land or here in the council chambers. And let me remind you that you can send an email to talk@tacoma.com. I am monitoring that email address. So, question came in. Large new debt service payments by the city are beginning for library and street projects. How much of the payments would you make by raising property taxes? What existing programs would you cut to allow debt service payments to be made?
Well, it's a great question. The debt service was primarily for the library project and also for the Flower Avenue, Green Street, and the Ethan Allen project as well. Those two are smaller. The bulk of it with the library is spaced out over 30 years. And so for me, the idea of if you're going to take on a project that's going to cost many millions of dollars, but it's a long-term project that future generations will benefit from for a long time. You know, the current library is about 60 years old, and we're going to be expanding that. To me, it makes sense to say, well, we're not going to just pay for it all right now, but we're going to have users of the facility and residents going forward to pay for that. The interesting thing is when you space it out over time with the debt service and so on, it's several $100,000s a year that gets added to the budget. And I'm very proud of the fact that in this budget specifically, which is the first year that debt service applies, we cut the property tax. And so we cut the property tax, notwithstanding having the additional funds for the long-term bond indebtedness, as well as a second installment into the affordable housing, without cutting any programs that provide services to residents. We went around and looked at other proposed construction projects, some within this building, some elsewhere, additional funds that could potentially be nice to add into, you know, the police pension and things like that, but none that I felt were problematic in terms of services that people received. And I don't see why we can't continue to do that sort of thing and keep tax rates low. So I feel okay about where we are. The other thing I'd mention is we have 4 or 5 guidelines in our city charter on taking on long-term bond indebtedness. And it's a series of measures, for example, what percentage the total cost is of the total assessed value of all the homes in the city, what percent it is of the budget on an annual basis. And there's 4 or 5 things like that. On all of those, we were well within the guidelines with the indebtedness that we took on. So you have to be intelligent about taking on things like that, but I feel like we were well within a manageable area when we did it.
Now, we live in a city in which within 1 mile you have residents who may be living in $1 million house, and you have residents who may be short of food, especially during the summertime. You have hungry children. Right. And there are different levels of engagement by residents within the community. In other words, you may have activities in which primarily Ward 1 residents are engaged. Then you have other activities in which lower income residents are engaged. Do you feel that the council and the city government has a role in bringing residents together in a more cohesive way?
I guess I wouldn't exactly say it's our role to literally bring them together, although to the extent we can have public events like the National Night Out and things like that where that happens, I'm for it. How I see it is I think we need to ensure that there are opportunities for those who maybe haven't felt they see the path for participation to do so. And a big part of that is translation of documents. One of the things that I saw when I first came on the council was that the recent census figures show that around 8,000 people in the city speak a language other than English at home. You mentioned earlier we have 17,000 or so residents. So that means close to half of the population that's true for. And we also have half who are renters. In many cases, that's the same sort of overlap. Now, in a lot of those cases, it's probably also true that the children are in school and speak English, but you can't expect a child to be able to understand, a letter from the city about taxes or a letter from the landlord. And so I've been pushing, and we have started doing more translations. If you look at, for example, the city website now, instead of having things in English and Spanish, which is great to have it in Spanish, we now have more and more things that are in French and also Amharic, with the different alphabet and so on, which is the Ethiopian language. So we're beginning to get in touch, I think, with a lot more people. The mayor has done a great job, and we've supported her, of having the city council sometimes meet in other parts of the city. For example, over in New Hampshire Avenue. And I was really glad that there's a group that formed up, which includes some people in Ward 1 who have called themselves Friends of the New Hampshire Avenue Rec Center, and they're involved, along with folks who live over in Ward 6 and along New Hampshire Avenue, and trying to find a way to modernize that facility. So I think there are ways we can have of getting together, but to me that is one of the biggest challenges, that and affordability and preserving the way of life that we really like here when these developments are happening. Those are like the three biggest challenges we face, and you can't just say, check off these two boxes and you'll have them. That pervades everything we do. The last thing I just mentioned on that is we adopted this racial equity lens through which we look at everything we do on the council. It's similar to an environmental impact statement and a financial impact statement. We're still figuring out, both the staff and the council, how to make that racial equity provision work, but I think it has the potential to be a really powerful tool for us, so that when we pass anything, whether it's repaving streets or fixing sidewalks to where recreation programs should be, we'll at least begin to think more about how does that policy or the funds that go with that program benefit more or less people within the city based on their racial and ethnic background.
All right. Well, I do want to get a few more questions in, and so we're going to try to do this quickly because we have Casey Kostiak is waiting in the wings here. But a couple of questions came in from residents. I want to make sure to get those questions to you. So one question is, how do you feel the city should move forward in terms of streets in Takoma Park named for Confederate generals?
I think we should, first of all, do the research and understand, because in some cases, while the names may be similar, they might not actually be connected to that. But where we find out that they are, for example, with Lee being the most prominent one probably, the big question to me is, do people who live on those streets and get their mail there and have their businesses there, do they want to have their address changed? Or could we consider as an alternative, if you go into D.C., for example, down near the Holocaust Museum on 15th Street, it's sort of honorary named also, Raoul Wallenberg Street or Avenue. And so I think we definitely should change those that can be connected, but whether we change it or ceremonially name it, potentially after somebody like Bruce Williams, the first openly gay elected official in Greater Washington, that might work as opposed to a complete change. I'd like to hear what neighbors on the affected streets have to say about it. And, we also have to be a little bit careful, because there are some Union generals like Sherman who weren't exactly paragons of, human rights and so on, in the way that they treated civilians, or later on in the Indian Wars too. And so I think that's another piece of the research that has to be done.
Okay, so this could be a much bigger discussion. You'd be open to looking into that and possibly...
We definitely should look into it. We've already said we're going to look into it. I just want to make sure that if we're going to actually completely change it, that doesn't disrupt something that residents of those streets would be concerned about.
All right. And then finally, I wonder what your feeling is about choosing a new police chief who will be amenable to civilian oversight.
Yeah, so for those who don't know, we put out a national search for a new police chief. Those applications just closed. I understand we received several dozen. We're working with a search firm to help us do it. And so over the next couple of months now, there'll be a process to go through that. We'll have some input into that as a council. The final choice will be made by the city manager under our form of government, and I hope maybe the person can be in, if not at the beginning of the year, soon afterward. Throughout the application materials, and I think it's available online on the city site, people can look at it, the key is to really emphasize community policing. And if you're familiar with President Obama's report on 21st century report on policing, within that there's this concept, or these two concepts of for police officers, the warrior or the guardian. And you can imagine if you go off to your job in a community as a warrior, what that means versus going as a guardian. We want the guardians. It does, when you're a guardian, you can still do whatever you need to do when something bad goes down, but you're approaching it from the perspective of you're part of the community in a different way. And so I think it's essential that our new chief have that. And to me, that includes not only fair treatment of all communities within the city, and overall we've done that, but I mean, I can tell you even, my own son has had interchanges when he's just walking along the sidewalk, and the police aren't always as friendly as they could be when he was growing up. That's part of it, but the other part of it is when people are victimized, I've seen some instances in which people who are victims of robberies, burglaries, it's been difficult for them to hear back from the police sometimes, just to give them updates on what's happening. And so I think, to me, that's sort of the other side of community policing. When you do community policing right, it's fair for all citizens. It helps you know what's going on better in the city so crime can be reduced, and you are more responsive to people who have run into trouble. So I hope we do all three of those things. I think that answers the question.
And inevitably, we're slipping on time a little bit, but I'm wondering if you could just finally succinctly lay out within less than a minute what it is that makes you the best candidate right now for Ward 1 council seat.
Well, thanks. I appreciate that. I do hope that people in Ward 1 will vote for me. I come from Massachusetts, and Tip O'Neill always used to say that you can't just assume, you have to ask. So I do ask those who live in Ward 1 to consider voting for me. I think the way I've approached the job has been as someone who is open and accessible and transparent. I really try hard to, either in individual meetings or in larger groups, to be in the community and available. I send out regular information to people in sometimes very lengthy detail for folks to read. And I think my conception of what good government means and what representative government means is that I'm available and reachable and open-minded. And I will say, as part of this current campaign, although, as you mentioned, I'm fortunate this time around not to have any opponents, I am knocking on every door. And so I'm down to about the last 4 streets to go, and I will have knocked on every door. So,
all right. Well, thank you very much.
Thank
And I will see you on Election Day.
excellent. Thank you. Excellent. Thank you.
So next up is candidate Casey Kostiak, who is running for the Ward 3 council seat. And while she's coming up to the dais, I'll remind viewers and listeners that you can send questions to me through talk@tacoma.com. And, of course, Tacoma with a K. So good to see you, Casey.
Thank you. It's nice to be here.
So we're about 10 minutes behind schedule, so we'll just add it forward. We're not gonna go too late tonight, but it's good to see you again. And you are the first candidate tonight who is not an incumbent. And so why don't we start out with you telling us why it is that you want to be a city council member?
Great. Thank you for having me tonight, and thank you for everyone who came out and is watching on TV. So I've lived in the community for the past 7 years, and I've been active in a variety of different ways. And I really care about the community, and I want to be a part of building the future of the community and play a role in helping to usher in a positive future. And so that's a big reason why I'm running for the City Council this year. I have been active on the Safe Roadways Committee. I joined the committee in 2013 and was on the committee for 5 years as a member and later the chair. So I had opportunities to interact with the City Council in that capacity and learned a lot in the process. I've also been a volunteer with the local nonprofit Let's Play America and helped organize play days and applied for grants for that organization. And my I have two young children. I have a 1-year-old and a 5-year-old. My 5-year-old is in kindergarten this year, and I'm a member of the PTA at Tacoma Park Elementary School. So I've been active in the community, and I really care about it a lot and want to kind of take that next step to run for office.
Okay. As somebody who's been active in the community, where do you think the city is really succeeding?
I think there's a lot of ways in which the city is succeeding. And a lot of those are things that attracted my family to move here originally 7 years ago. We were really attracted by the progressive values that the city has, by the commitment to environmentalism, to activism in the community, to the diversity of the community. And I think we're really doing a good job of building on those things and supporting those things. I think there's also more that can be done. I think we have some great staff members who are doing a great job in, and I've had great interactions with them. I think that's one way in which the city is succeeding. I will echo some of the comments of the mayor and Councilmember Kovar in saying I think we're doing great in environmental initiatives. We have electric car chargers. We have a Safe Grow initiative. We have a committee on the environment. We have an environmental impact statement on our agendas for the City Council, and I think that's really great. Those are things that I think make a huge impact. And I think we also, although I think there's more to be done, I think we have a strong commitment to affordability and affordable housing that is really a positive thing for the city and unique to the city. So I think those are some of the ways in which we're doing well as a city.
Well, so let's go with the last question that I asked to Peter, which is about the police chief, and what do you feel are the right attributes for our next police chief? So
I think that a real commitment to community policing and working with citizens in the community is really essential. I actually come from a law enforcement family myself. My father was a law enforcement agent, so I feel like I can kind of walk the two sides. I have grown up surrounded by law enforcement agents in that capacity, and I know the challenges that they face, and I know that it can be a terribly dangerous job and it can be a stressful job. And so I have a lot of empathy for what they go through. At the same time, you know, as a citizen, I interact with the police and I talk with my neighbors who interact with the police, and I think that, you know, most of us want to have those positive interactions. I mean, all of us want to have those positive interactions, especially when we're a victim of a crime or we have a concern about something or we want support in, patrolling our neighborhoods to make sure that cars aren't speeding by. And so I think we need a police chief who is willing to listen to those concerns and to work with neighbors. Just a few weeks ago, I had the great opportunity to walk with some members of the Circle Woods neighborhood on their regular walks around the neighborhood. They have a neighborhood watch group that they've kept up for years, and I think that's a good opportunity for the citizens to be involved, and the more that they can cooperate with the police chief and the police, I think that can start to build that relationship a little more.
Okay, now you are the council member in whose ward, or not, you're not the council member yet, you are the candidate for the ward in which the Tacoma Junction actually does sit and the TPSS Food Co-op does sit. And I'm wondering what your views are on development of that lot.
So I have followed the process from the beginning, the RFP, to the current proposal of the concept plan. And in general, I think that we are moving in the right direction with the development. I also think there are some things that we need to look at, and I'm really glad that the City Council has had a thorough discussion of some of the issues with the concept plan, and that we've had a lot of great community feedback. It was really inspiring to me to see so many people come out to the last City Council meeting, 2 weeks ago, City Council meeting, and speak so much about what they thought based on the concept plan. And I share some of those concerns related to the concept plan. I think, as others have said, we need to have more community space available on the ground level so that people can gather there without necessarily shopping. I think we need to look at the overall size of the development in terms of its impact on the neighborhood. And I really think that we need to consider how the lay-by is going to work, both for the co-op and for the intersection as a whole, and how the development will impact the traffic at that location.
Now, there are some members of the community who really just want to halt the process. And frankly, I've heard from some people who would prefer to not go forward with any development at all. What are your thoughts on those ideas?
I think we need to move forward on the development, and I think we can find a way to have a positive outcome. I think that NDC has been receptive to the things that we've talked with them about, and I think even though the current concept plan might not be exactly what we wanted, I think that that's not a reason to go back to the starting point or to say we shouldn't do anything here. It's an underused parking lot at the moment. It's, it doesn't do anything for us in terms of stormwater management. It doesn't really provide a great gathering space for people. I don't think it's an asset to the community, and I think we can do better than that. I think we can build something that is really positive.
Okay. I wonder if you could address the balancing act that you will have to face on the council of dealing with the budget. And, we had a question, I know you don't have all the numbers in front of you, but we had a question about payments coming due here in the city. And, are we going to raise taxes or are we going to cut programs? What would be your approach to that situation?
I think it's always a struggle. I mean, we have great programs within the community, and we have great initiatives that we have initiated and that we want to keep. At the same time, I hear from people all the time that there are challenges with affordability and that they are worried about their taxes. And so I think it's just something that council members really need to take seriously, and I think that all of us do take that responsibility seriously. I think we need to look at alternatives and be creative as much as possible. Looking at some of the projects that are upcoming and the budgets for those, I think because those are long-term projects, we have some flexibility where we're not being, hit with those costs all at one time, and we don't have to face a serious tax increase or anything like that. So I think that's one aspect, and then I think we can just continue to look for where can we trim without causing a serious impact on the programs we really care about.
Okay, you mentioned three aspects of our city that you find, very favorable. So our progressive values, environmental values, and an emphasis on diversity, ethnic, and economic. And I'm wondering if you feel that there are any dangers of losing those values. Are there forces within the community or from outside the community that are putting any of those, the progressivism, the environment, or the diversity, in danger?
So I don't think that we are in danger of losing our progressive nature, and I'm pleased with that. I do think that there are forces on the national level that are attacking that, and so I do think that we need to be vigilant and continue to be active and promote the values that we believe in. I don't see that as something that is changing in Tacoma Park. In terms of environmentalism, I think it's the same thing, but I think that we, as we grow and change and the community within the larger DC area changes, there's a lot more development going on here in general. If you look at each of the metro stops along the Red Line and all of the different metro stops, there's a lot of change and development and building, and so I think we need to remain vigilant in terms of our commitment to the environment and what we're doing. I've seen a lot of that already in the initiatives that we have. There was just a vote the other day to add neonicotinoids to the safe grow restrictions that we have here. So I feel like there's a strong commitment to that, and I don't think that that's being challenged. In terms of diversity, I do think that this is the one area where we really need to be focused, and I'm very happy that our mayor and city council have put into action the racial equity initiative this past year and are looking at the impacts of policies on racial equity. I also feel like we're faced with a lot of challenges in terms of affordability that are going to impact our diversity, especially on a socioeconomic level. And we need to make sure that we're supporting things like affordable housing and that we're finding ways to support affordable housing throughout the community, so they're not isolated pockets of affordable housing that are separated from the rest of the community. And I think a lot of times we do have situations where large groups of primarily white homeowners are attending festivals or other events, and we're not hearing from people of color and people who are renters and people who might have low-income households. And so the more that we can do to encourage people to talk to each other and to gather and promote events and activities that are places where people can come together and kind of cross those borders, I think are good.
Okay, now you worked on the Safe Roadways Committee, and I happen to be a bike commuter, like my friend Jay Keller, another commuter I see on the road. And I have to admit that I don't always feel safe on the streets of Tacoma Park. In fact, sometimes I feel more safe on the streets of Washington, D.C. Are there more things that can be done to make the streets safe for cyclists and pedestrians?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. As a member of the Safe Roadways Committee, I was very active in promoting walkability and bikeability in the city. And I think we made a lot of progress. We've added some contraflow bike lanes that are really important in the community, and we have just recently worked with the City Council to make a recommendation regarding bikes on sidewalks that I think was a success in many ways. And I think there's more that we can do so that we continue to feel safe as walkers and bikers. I think one of the main issues is maintenance of our bike lanes and our sidewalks. I think we need to do more to improve sidewalks, especially along state highways. And I'm happy to see that the city is starting to budget some money to do that. That's been a long-standing issue between the city and the State Highways Association in terms of who is responsible for those sidewalks. And I think that we've kind of worked it out, and the city is starting to budget some money for that and is working on an agreement with State Highways where we could figure out exactly how the engineers can work to build new sidewalks when we need them. And that's a great step forward and something we need to work on. In terms of biking, I think that we have a lot of infrastructure already. It would be great if we could build more, but we're really constrained by the narrowness of some of the streets. And so in places where we can't address it directly with bike lanes, I think we need to be really vigilant in looking at maintenance issues, because a pothole or a sunken manhole cover or vegetation growing into the roadway isn't a big deal for a car, but it is for a bike. And so I think the more that we can focus on those and try to look through the lens of a biker when we're doing these things, or a walker, rather than through somebody driving a car, I think that's where we really are lacking sometimes, and to try to take that focus and consider that when we're doing maintenance issues.
All right, my last question is going to be an easy one, but yesterday there was an event at Republic, Tacoma Park Women Represent, and I'm wondering if you could tell us if you believe that it's important to have women represented on the City Council. Absolutely.
That is an easy question. Yes, it was a wonderful event, and I want to thank the organizers of it. I think it is so important to have women's voices on the City Council. It has for the past few years and throughout the entirety of Tacoma Park's history been mostly male. And I think in our community, with the values that we have, that is not representative of what we are. And I'm excited to see a lot of women running in this election. We represent more than half of the community, and I think we need to have our voices heard. I also think, as a young woman and a woman who has young children, ages 5 and 1, I think that I bring a voice to the council that has not as traditionally been heard. And I think that that's something that needs to be done, because there are a lot of families moving into the community in particular who are in that position and have those concerns. And so I look forward to being a voice for that.
Okay, and I'll circle back to the beginning and just ask you once again, what is it that makes you the right candidate right now for Ward 3?
Well, one of the aspects is I would like to be the voice for young families, and as a woman, kind of bring that perspective. I really care about the community, and like I said, I've been active in the community for the past 7 years, and I feel like I have learned a lot in that process, and I've learned a lot in the process of talking with people during this election. And one of my strengths is being able to listen to people and being able to make people feel comfortable in discussing issues that are of concern to them. So I really want to focus on improving community outreach, and I've already done some things related to this. I'm trying to, obviously I'm going around knocking on doors, even though I am running unopposed. I think that's really important. I'm also trying to have events, informal events where people can just drop by to a restaurant or a park throughout the ward. So not necessarily just restaurants in Old Town, but we're going to have an event at a restaurant on New Hampshire Avenue so that people have an opportunity to come from the nearby neighborhoods there. And also having events at parks so that people with children can come and talk with me and share their feelings and concerns for the city. And those are things that I want to continue as a council member, because I think the more that we have input from people and the more that we can share what's going on in the city, the more we will learn about how to move forward with the processes and how to do things best for the community.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And our final unopposed candidate is coming up to the dais, Terry Siemens, who represents Ward 4 in Tacoma Park. And while he's coming up, I will remind viewers and listeners that I am monitoring my email. And if you have a question that you'd like me to ask, you can send it to me at talk@tacoma.com. All right. Good to see you, Terry.
Good to see you. Thank you so much for putting this on.
I still think of you as a new city council member.
I feel like a new city council member often.
How many terms has it been?
I haven't counted. I started in 1999.
Yeah. Okay. To start, I'd like to hear actually what you feel are the particular challenges that Ward 4 residents face that may be different from challenges elsewhere in the city.
Yeah, I think some previous speakers tonight have talked about the language. When I checked with the Tacoma Park Elementary School several months ago, and there are 45 different languages as the primary language of the students in that school. And I believe that many of those young people live in Ward 4, and although they face particular challenges, in fact, many of the students there were born in other countries, and so they face some challenges that you and I probably didn't face when we were young and in our elementary school. The other thing that kind of goes hand in hand with that is jobs. When I talk with the residents, and again I'm talking about primarily the apartment dwellers, the renters, they're really focused on work. That's why one of the reasons they don't participate so much in the community events. But it's also when I have done a little questionnaire as I've been campaigning this year with, what do they need, what would they like to see, and it primarily focuses around, a majority of the answers I get focus around help in learning how to write a resume, how to get jobs, how to search for jobs. It seems to be a real prime issue here.
Okay. Well, relatedly, I'm wondering if, one of the disappointments most election years, actually probably every election year, is low voter turnout. And, we look at the national election where, less than half of the country votes, but it's, far less than that even in Tacoma Park. What can we do to improve voter turnout in Tacoma Park?
Well, I think certainly the council's been working at trying to expand the turnout, and we've, as you know, this year is going to be the last year that we're holding our elections on a cycle that's off from the state and federal elections. So that's one change that we're making for the next election is to get on the same cycle, so we try to improve the voter turnout and participation in the city elections. But, ever since I started on the council, I've really worked hard trying to get people registered to vote and getting people to turn out for the vote. With disappointing results, I'll admit. I'd like to see better turnout. I'm hopeful this year we're going to see more. We have kind of a changing demographic within Ward 4, and again, I'm talking about within the apartment community. And I would like to point out, I don't just represent the apartment community. You know, I have probably not only the most dense ward in the city as far as most people per square inch, but also probably the most diverse income ward in the city too. And I do strive to represent everybody in the city.
Okay. What do you see as the successes of the city and your own successes on the city council over the past 2 years or even throughout your tenure?
It's hard for me to say, go back and just say, well, 2 years, let's draw a line. But, you know, certainly since I got on the council, I've had the pleasure of riding along with the other councils as we have improved the administration of the city government. I think we are head and shoulders above where we were. I remember when I first got on the city council, performance reviews weren't done on a regular basis. Union contracts weren't negotiated on a timely basis, and those things are done now. I think we have a very good city manager now, and then I think the council has also made good strides with better planning, with the strategic plan that we have in place, and we've refined that. Every council refines that a little more. We had when I first got on the council, I was concerned that we had a reputation as being environmental leaders, but we didn't seem to walk the talk. But boy, you can't say that today. We're again back in a leadership role with the environment, and that feels good. And there's other areas within the government where we're doing the same thing. It's just good professional organization now, but with a community-oriented staff.
All right. Well, a viewer at home has sent in a question, which is actually related to a previous question we had. So you heard earlier I asked about some of the new payments that are coming due, and the question of whether we need to cut programs or raise taxes. So there's a variation here. The council has a tendency to initiate new programs that need more funding, which drives up city taxes. And this resident gives some examples: the dog park, Safe Grow, the Flower Avenue Green Street, election synchronization. How do you square the new initiatives with rhetoric about keeping the city more affordable?
Interesting question. I think the best thing I can say is the feedback that I get from residents, and there is not a whole lot of pushback. They want the people that talk to me about it say they want these new programs, and they're willing to pay for them. It's in some ways a shock to me, but that's the way it has been. Whenever we talk about, and I try to talk with people about what programs they feel we can cut, and there's not a whole lot of items added to that list. So it's I try to be responsive to the people in the community, and that's kind of where it seems they stand right now. So I look forward to hearing all the feedback I'm going to get after this radio show.
Well, a question I haven't asked any other candidate yet. You're getting all my new questions. Because it
all
just
these
seems
notes
like,
are useless.
it just seems like we're not making much progress on this. But I want to ask you about the issue of double taxation, and if you feel like the city is able to make any headway there.
You must have read my notes. I have for quite a while now said that I think we should not spend money on chasing that bus, because we have made so little progress, and I am so pessimistic about our chances of success that I think it's money ill spent.
All right.
I think it's a problem. I think that the solution lays at the state legislation, and I don't think that I don't think enough of the state legislators are interested or give a hoot because they don't have municipalities.
Well, I do know I've been asking that question since 1995. So, Okay, I asked the mayor about the draft housing and economic development strategic plan, and as she noted, you just received it last week, and maybe haven't reviewed all the data. But I'm wondering if you could answer whether you feel that the rent stabilization is fairly represented, and how you feel you could strengthen rent stabilization.
You have asked the question about rent stabilization every election.
That's true.
Since I've known you, and that's part of the problem. Why do we keep bringing this up? It is a successful program. It's something that has demonstrated that we've been able to maintain affordable housing to an extent that is unmatched, unparalleled, as the mayor said, within the region. Again, we have a suggestion in the plan that was just brought to us that somehow by increasing rents, that it's going to give the landlords enough money that they're going to go out and be wanting to maintain their buildings and the infrastructure of their buildings when they haven't done that before, and they are getting money in, but they choose to use it in other ways. Again, it's frustrating to me that we have to revisit this subject over and over and over again, and kind of have this fight to see that rent stabilization is successful. It works. Landlords make money. They don't get to make as much money as they could if it was at market rate.
All right. What do you think of the city's sustainability budget and priorities? You touched on that a little bit earlier. What would you change or not when it comes to sustainability?
Again, I think I'm so happy to see the progress that we've made with the city and really taking a leadership role. Councilmember Kovar talked about the award that we just got. I don't see a need unless the community wants to push back and say, well, that's where we're going to get the money to build the next dog park or whatever. I think it's valuable to the city, not just to the city to be a leader in environmental issues, but also to be responsible and ethical in the way we go about business.
All right. Well, as the city prepares to hire a new police chief, I'm going to ask you that question about a civilian oversight committee. Do you feel like that's appropriate? Would you be looking for a police chief that would be willing to have civilian oversight?
Sure. I think that's, from my past that that's.
Or I'm sorry, Civilian Review Board. Let me get my terminology correct. Yes.
Okay. Our police department is an area that I've long thought needs improvement. I think it has improved significantly since I first got on the council. But again, I think that I'm optimistic about hiring the new chief this time, because for the first time, I think we really have a strong city manager with a community-oriented perspective. And at the same time, parallel with that, in the past, I and some other council members have complained about the policing, but have been less clear about what we want to see within the police department. And I think this most recent council under Mayor Stewart's leadership, we've been better at saying what it is that we do want rather than what we don't like. And so I'm optimistic that we're going to end up with a police chief that's more representative of the character of Tacoma Park than what we've had out of our police department in the past. The Civilian Review Board, I think, is an important component. But more important, I think, is a chief who has kind of an open mind. I mean, there's the thin blue line we always hear about. That where the police stick together and don't turn in their buddies, but that's not so different than the the thin green line with the doctors, or lawyers seem to have their thing where they protect their colleagues. but there's also the need to do it in a way that is not sticking up for the people who are doing things that are inappropriate. And I think that thin blue line has gotten too thick sometimes. So I need a chief that's open-minded in these areas.
All right. Well, our time is just about up, but I feel like I can't let you go without asking you about the future of swimming in Tacoma Park.
I believe that's that may get me in trouble with the ethics board, since my wife runs the Piney Branch pool. So I will just leave it to say that I think it's a resource that is valuable to the city, and we'll leave it at that.
Okay. You've been on the council since 1999. What makes you the best candidate right now to serve Ward 4?
I love the city. I like listening to my neighbors and helping my neighbors out, and that's everybody in my ward. I think I'm a decent problem solver. I don't necessarily have all the solutions myself, but I can listen and hear what people need and see how we can find the results. I'll give you an example, if I can, real quick. You know, there's some people came to me about homeless people and said that, you know, this is an issue in the community. We think of our lovely city and don't think of the kinds of problems we have, but there are homeless people in the city. And so I've worked to put together a team. In fact, one of the fellows is here tonight, and we're working on the homeless thing with a nonprofit organization. They've already rented a house. We already have the first person moved into it, and that's why I should be reelected, so I can finish all these little jobs.
All right. Great. Thanks, Terry.
Thank you, Eric. Appreciate it.
All right. We are only 11 minutes over, but we move on to the second portion of our evening, where I will be talking with candidates in contested races, starting with Ward 2. That's Cindy Dybala, Joe Edgell, and Ashley Nugent. And remind listeners at home, viewers at home, that you can send questions, and actually viewers here in the City Council chambers, you can send questions to me at talk@tacoma.com. And we will try to juggle things a little bit differently. It won't be quite as much of a chat with three candidates. What I'm going to do is ask questions, and I have a timer, which I'll set for 2 minutes. And if that doesn't work, we'll go to 1 minute. But we'll start with 2 minutes. And every candidate will have a chance to answer, and then if I feel like we need a follow-up, I'll do a follow-up. And we'll alternate where I begin. So thank you. Nice to see all of you here.
Good to be here.
Thanks, Eric.
So to begin with, let's just go down the row, and I'll start with the closest candidate, Cindy Dybala, to ask you why you're running for office and what you feel are the challenges that you would like to address as City Council, as a City Council member for Ward 2.
Are we on?
Yes, we're on. Let me figure out how to start this. Go.
Thank you. So hi, I'm Cindy Dybala, and I am a proud parent and longtime resident of Tacoma Park. I've served on the Recreation Committee as co-chair for many years. Until recently, I am co-chair of the current Environment Committee. I've also served on that more obscure City Manager Selection Committee and a couple of other less spirited groups. I bring to this a fairly long track record with community groups. I'm currently on the Tacoma Foundation Board, for example. So why me? Why now? with all that going on. And I've been frustrated at the national level, and I feel this I can do. I have the skills, I have the relationships, I have the practical on-the-ground experience here in Tacoma. And I think it's time for me to step up my game and offer what I've got to serve Ward 2 and the city. I think there's challenges, absolutely. For me, affordable housing is one of them, and that's not just taxes, it's a whole package of things, as you've heard from some of the other folks. Community inclusion is not just a buzzword to me, it's something I've worked hard with others to bring to fruition for years, and I think we have quite a bit of work to do there. Celebrate Tacoma is great, it's not enough. On sustainability, I think we're doing great. I think we have more to do. There's plenty more to do in that area. And on policing, I look forward to a new police chief and to working with the police chief, the city manager, and the rest of the council on nailing down those things that are important values in Tacoma Park. Whether we've lived here since February, whether we have moved here 30 years ago, people are still coming here for a reason. And I think we need to just get that base, and that's why I'm doing that right now.
Okay, great. Thank you, Cindy. Joe?
Eric, thank you so much, and I really appreciate everybody coming tonight.
Sorry, let me figure out the timer.
Oh, no problem.
I'm not used to being up here. Let's see. Okay. Oh, no, I don't have it.
You want to borrow my iPhone?
That's okay. I think I got it. There you go.
All right. So I'm Joe Edgell, also a Ward 2 candidate, and really thrilled to be here and thrilled to be able to be in this race and to represent you all. My whole reason for running is to make a positive difference for my neighbors, for all of you. I've been honored to serve as chair of 2 city committees, the Task Force on Environmental Action, which was the precursor to the current Environmental Committee, and also chair of the Safe Roadways Committee. And also fortunate enough to serve on the Council Compensation Committee, which is this odd committee required by city charter that looks at the appropriateness of the city council's compensation structure. And I've made just about as much difference for you all as I can in the committees. And honestly, Eric, I would really like to make more difference for the neighbors, and I think I'm the right candidate to do that. I've always felt that my goal to represent you is to serve as not only the action candidate, the guy who gets things done, but also the person who brings practical solutions to complex problems. There are a lot of people who have very, very strong opinions, and my job, I think, is to listen to you all and try to take all of that input that I've received and to move it into a practical solution that meets the needs of the community. Every single report from the committees that I have been honored to serve on has been unanimous. Even the Task Force on Environmental Action, which had about roughly 17 professionals, environmental professionals on it, a bit like herding cats, even that report was unanimous. We had the support of every diverse view. So practical solutions to diverse problems and diverse opinions is something that I bring to the City Council race, and I hope to be honored to serve you after the election on November 7th.
Okay, thank you, Joe. Hold on one second. Okay, Ashley?
Hi, Eric. Hi, everyone out there. My name is Ashley Nugent. I am also running for Ward 2. I'm going to take a little different approach to this answer. Why am I running for Ward 2? I'm running for Ward 2 for underrepresented populations. I'm going to start kind of with a story. My sister, Gabi in-law, she's sitting in the audience today. On Saturday, she won a Special Olympics gold medal, and it was one of the greatest days of her life. And today, and today was one of the worst days of her life. Her uncle, who is her best friend, he passed away. She found out a few hours ago. And she still wanted to come. She still wanted to support me. She wanted to support Casey. She wanted to support Mayor Kate. She wanted to support the other candidates up here. That was what she wanted to do. Gabi represents why I'm running. We need a strong voice for our underrepresented populations, the community that gives us so much love and so much strength and so much commitment, and they don't ask for much back. And the disability population in and of itself and underrepresented populations have been left behind for so long, not in this city, in many cities. And it is time to step up and really help this community. Absolutely 100% be committed to it. Socioeconomic diversity and inclusion are one of my main tenets why I'm running. We can't just say, we want to champion affordability, and what does that mean? We actually have to take action steps to do that. We have to have campaign finance reform, so someone can't just walk into this election, pay campaign managers, buy as many signs as they want. We need limits, because if we don't have limits, we're cutting off a whole population that has great ideas, that really cares, and that wants to be involved. That is why I'm here. That is one of the main reasons I want to be your city council person. We have so many minority voices who will come and speak, and we hear them too much. We need to bring all the voices to the table, and I'm the candidate that can do that for all of you.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm going to go to the hot button issue of the junction.
So many.
Well, you have a couple in Ward 2, but we'll start with the junction, and I'll start with you, Joe. We'll try a minute just so we can try to get more questions. And you think that's enough time to?
No problem.
Okay. So, and I know that it's likely that many of our viewers and listeners have heard from all of you on this issue, but just in case they haven't, what are your thoughts on whether or not the city should be proceeding with development at Tacoma Junction, and what cautions you have?
Well, Eric, the City Council has decided to move forward preliminarily with development. I think there's a lot of details to work out. The concept plan that we've all seen is inadequate, and it's not what the council, I think, or the community want. So there still are some changes that need to be made. But the council's made that decision, and I see my role as the city council member that follows this council to make sure that the development agreement with the developer is followed. There's a clause in there that says that the co-op will be accommodated. So we can have both development and the co-op, and it's my goal to make sure that that's followed, to make sure that we're representing all of the views at the junction. I mean, we've all been stuck in traffic in the junction. It doesn't work. And as the Safe Roadways Committee chair, the committee that I was honored to work on, we made a recommendation on how to improve traffic flow, some studies to do. So I think there's a lot we can do there.
Okay, great, thanks. Ashley? Oh, sorry.
That's okay.
I need someone to help me out.
We need Mayor Stewart up here. That's
okay.
What we need. Come on.
Yes. All right.
So the city is charged with the economic viability of almost 20,000 residents. I can say this without being called money grubbing. It is very important if we want to champion things like inclusion and affordability that we work on bringing the junction here now. It's been in the works for a very long time. I am very supportive of the co-op and their thrivability, not only just their survival, but their thrivability. We have some really serious things to look at in the future. Right now, the unemployment rate in Tacoma Park is 7%. It's higher than the county. It's higher than the state. The hospital is leaving in a couple of years, and that represents, over 1,000 jobs. The hospital employs more people in Tacoma Park than any other place. We really need to be sure that we have places for people to go, places for people to have jobs, and also the community space. I mean, that's so important. We all want to be able to walk somewhere, to enjoy our families, to enjoy our friends. And I think I'm being cut off, so I'll stop there.
That's all right. We'll take a reading later to see if you feel like the 1 minute is too short or not. Okay, Cindy.
Yeah, as a co-op member with a 3-digit number who shops there all the time, I welcome the notion of small-scale retail development in the junction. NDC signed a contract with the city. The city has a long list of public values that are represented in that contract, and I think the job of this council on Wednesday night and the council that will that will come in November is to hold NDC to those values that were put out at the beginning, at the start of the agreement. For me, this particular proposal that the council will be looking at Wednesday night is too massive. there's not enough public gathering space that you don't have to pay for a latte to use. And what about that traffic study that was recommended some time ago? I took a quick look at the resolution this evening. It looks like they're hitting all those points. So moving forward, it would be my job as your council member to make sure that NDC stays with that, and that the co-op, that options to accommodate the co-op be put forward and be discussed with the co-op.
Okay. And just for fun, let's just do a really quick reading here. So in terms of whether or not the city council should continue forward, do we just yes or no? We'll start with Ashley just to be.
Just a yes or no?
Yes.
Absolutely.
I think at this point where we are, yeah.
Yes.
Okay, great. Just wanted to make sure I was reading that right. Okay. All right. So, Ashley, I'm wondering if you feel that the city has handled the purchase of the Dorothy Woods property appropriately, and if you have any thoughts on what's appropriate in terms of going forward with that piece of green space.
Sure. The property was valued at $67,000. It was almost 3 acres. So you have to question why it was valued at $67,000. It's because it was encumbered with over $400,000 worth of debt. At the purchase price of $67,000, I think it would have been a great investment, but we ended up paying $250,000 plus. There was a loan assigned from Bank of America to Fairview that happened, kind of in the shadows of the 2015 purchase. It's difficult. I think it needed to be more transparent. I think the fundraising elements on one side could have been more transparent. I think, but I think it needs to be resolved. Right now the motion to dismiss was denied. The judge has recommended mediation. I hope we can, figure that out in mediation to bring costs down. And because if you open up the discovery process, that's going to cost lots of more money, lots more time. And I think there is a really productive way to settle it. And I really think the city that's their goal, and that's what I would like to see.
Okay, great. And just to do you feel like the 1 minute is too short? Should we try for a minute and a half on these answers?
For this one, probably. I think it's really complex, and I think the other two might have a little more to say than I do. But I think you should.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anyway, so we'll just proceed with the 1 minute. But I'm just trying to, make sure that I'm not making you rush through your.
Yeah,
answers.
it's a really I'm an attorney. I love property law. It's one of my specialties. It's a difficult subject for lots of people to understand.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
So, Cindy. Dorothy's Woods.
Yeah, I'm proud of the role that I played in the city's decision to purchase the woods, in gathering donations to contribute to that city expense, and to supplement that with extensive volunteer work over the last 2.5 years to bring the trees back to health and to improve the property generally. I don't know that everyone's aware of how much volunteer effort has gone into that. I think we're all concerned about the final outcome. This is one of the reasons that we asked to have the city property costs that have been expended to date and the possible costs coming up, plus the status of the legal proceeding put on the city website so everyone can see it. It's under the project directory under Dorothy's Woods, and you can stay current that way. I think the city council is going in the right direction in resolving it. I look forward to the discussion on the covenant to add additional legal protections, and I feel confident that this will resolve.
Okay, great. Thanks. Joe?
So I was a financial contributor to protect the property. Of my own personal funds, I donated to that. And I think it is one of the last open spaces in Tacoma Park. and definitely at least portion of the property should be preserved. There's some good habitat value to the property. At the same time, Eric, I have a lot of concerns about the amount of money we're spending on the property, and myself and a few other local investors had a secondary plan that would have eliminated the cost to the city and still preserved about 3/4 of the woods. That didn't come to pass. The city ended up winning that bid. But I do have concerns about how much the city spends on some of these projects and what the overall impact is. I've knocked on doors. People have been concerned very frequently about the cost of taxes in this city. And we get a lot of good services, and I think that's good. And I support paying for those services. But I think we need to be judicious about those costs. And certainly Dorothy's Woods is one of those areas that we should be careful.
All right. I'm going to actually ask a follow-up on this question, which is since I think that this is one of the specifically Ward 2 issues, and that is, what do you think is the best? What do you envision at that site in the future? What is it that you'd like to see happen on that site? And we'll start with you, Cindy.
Yeah, I think my views are in line with the city resolution that committed to purchasing the property in the first place, which is essentially a natural park area that brings a lot of natural wildlife, ecological, stormwater, and climate change adaptation values to our community. To me, this was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, the last remaining private wooded property of any size in Takoma Park. And if the city was committed to sustainability, this was the chance to do it. And reasonable people can clearly disagree about whether that was worth it. But I look forward again to seeing the costs, both the initial costs, the money that is paid back to the city as a taxpayer, as someone who's as a government that's owed taxes, and the money that was put in by citizens. The numbers I don't think are the issue. I think the issue is the people see that wooded portion as a community-wide value, not just a Ward 2 value, and that many people see the front portion, the McLaughlin School, as a very different, potentially developable property when it comes available.
All right, Joe and Ashley, I'll give you a few extra seconds on that as well, beyond the 1 minute. Yes, Joe.
So what most people don't realize is the city is bidding on sort of an upland portion, kind of an up-the-hill wooded piece now is what's in litigation. There's kind of a middle piece, which is a city right-of-way for an old street that was never built, and then there's a lower portion, which is the school, which is currently not under city control. My view is that the lower portion is excellent for economic development. The old school is probably beyond repair, unfortunately, and could be knocked down and could bring some nice services to that neighborhood that they currently don't have. The middle portion, which is grass area, that's something that could be used for another community oriented, a playground or a dog park or some area like that, with the preservation of the upland portion. So I think that would be a nice mix of uses that we could bring to that area of the city, and it's something that all the city could benefit from, not just the Ward 2 residents.
Okay, great. Ashley?
Yeah, sure. Oh, I'll turn this on. All right. I think there's a work session next week about having a covenant against development on the property in and of itself. So if that's what the city sees as the best outcome, that's the best outcome. We can all come here and we can talk about that. Sustainability, environmental activism is a wonderful, wonderful portion or wonderful initiative that the city undertakes. I think the city has already, prior to the purchase, enacted sort of this, like, we're protecting the stream and around this sort of area. So there's already things in place to protect it from being developed. But I do agree, maybe the lower portion, we need to look in developing it. We need to be champions for affordability. There's limited space in Takoma Park. We want our taxes to go lower, and we also want to be inclusive. So I really need to think going forward that how all of these things intertwine with one another and the best outcomes for environmental sustainability and affordability and inclusive and socioeconomic diversity. And that's all conversations that we can have including next week with the covenant.
Okay, great. Thanks, Ashley. Joe, do you have an agenda for racial equity? This was a question from the audience. So let's see. Yeah, do you have a racial equity agenda for Ward 2?
So am I on yet? Can I
yes,
go?
Start talking. We'll put you on.
Fantastic. So I'm not really sure what the questioner means by an agenda, but I think racial diversity is extremely important. And in Ward 2, unfortunately, we're losing some of our longtime African American residents. So we ask ourselves, why is that? Well, the property taxes in Ward 2 are high as they are in the rest of the city. And a lot of the African American residents that I've spoken with are finding it hard to continue living there and think that selling the property and moving someplace else would be better. Well, necessarily, that means we lose our racial diversity in Ward 2. And I don't think that's good. I think a community suffers when it all looks and sounds the same. So I think affordable housing is a key portion of making sure that we both keep our racial as well as our economic diversity in the area. And I think we need to figure out a way to bring a little bit more affordable housing to Ward 2.
Thank you. Ashley?
Oh, same question? Or
Yes, same question, yes. Do you have a racial equity agenda for Ward 2?
Do I have a racial equity agenda for Ward 2? Absolutely. I think we need to have more socioeconomic diversity. Like I talked about on Friday, I introduced some campaign finance reform where we can get the underrepresented populations more involved in Tacoma Park politics. I think it's very important. Like I said, we have some campaign spending finance limits. I also think that there's ways to get persons involved who want to run for city council, who may have one or two jobs, minimum wage jobs, and we can do that sort of like on a sliding scale type thing. So, for example, if someone wants to run for city council, we can have a spending limit for the race itself at $3,000. You can have a GoFundMe, can raise that very easily, I would think. And then if these persons do get onto city council, we can give them stipends. We can give them an extra salary, or persons who maybe make a little more money on city council can donate portions of their salary. I think that would be a great way to get more racial equality on the city council, so our city council looks and feels like the community it represents.
Okay, great. Thanks. Cindy?
Yeah, I'd like to start with a story about one of my neighbors who bought his house when it was Prince George's County. He's African American. He's, I think, in his 70s. And he wants to stay. His kids are pushing him to cash out. And he wants to stay. So what can we do to help him in Ward 2? That's housing policy, accessory units and basements. It's not just property taxes, but the whole package of financing for our city. Reserve policy, that nasty tax duplication issue that never seems to get resolved, that I think we need to make another run at, by the way. It's a number of areas that would help that person stay in Ward 2. I also think that to the degree there is buildable space, affordable housing, a range of affordability prices should be on the list. And I would like to pursue putting some substance on the racial equity policy that the City Council recently adopted so that we can bring that into practice. What does that actually mean? What do we do?
Okay, great. I'm wondering if I could hear from each of you what you feel would be your top priority as a city council member. And are we back with you, Cindy? I lost track of. Yeah, we'll go with you first, Cindy.
Sure. I think it's a tie between affordability and inclusion, and by which I mean on affordability, that, as I've said, is not just property taxes. It's not just the tax rate, which, as was pointed out earlier, did go down ever so slightly for the city taxes in this past year. It's a whole package of fiscal issues that allow, first, the council to look at the budget, as that's the number one responsibility, make sure that budget is sound, the investments are good, and and money is being spent effectively, look at reserve policy, look at tax duplication. And that's also affordability on the housing side. We've heard about the housing study that's just been released. I have some questions about some of the specific recommendations, especially with respect to rent stabilization. But that's got to be a conversation that we've got to have. And I think that dovetails very nicely with my other very important number one of building inclusion for all races, cultures, economic levels, and different types of people that live here.
Okay, great. Joe?
My number one priority, Eric, is to serve the constituents of Ward 2, to take the issues that are important to you and to make sure that those get to consideration at the City Council. Whether it's safe routes to schools, which a number of you have talked to me about, whether it's better neighborhood traffic calming, whether it's fixing the broken 911 system, which we have a problem with in Ward 2 when our calls go to Prince George's County. Most people don't realize that, rather than Montgomery County. Whether it's continuing to clean up Sligo Creek, whether it's improving how responsive the government is and increasing the two-way communication with the city staff and the residents, whether it's mail-in voting to increase our participation rate, improving Tacoma Junction, or ensuring a fair and reasonable tax system here in Tacoma Park. My job is to serve the constituents, and that's what people have asked me to work on while I'm here on the City Council.
Great, thanks. Ashley?
So I believe that my priorities are in line with the current City Council priorities. So right now, number one is to have a livable community, and what that means to me is an affordable, safe, and inclusive community for everyone. To advance economic developments, we have a wonderful opportunity at the Junction. We have the library. We have the rec center. And environmental sustainability, that's also very important to me as well. But not just environmental sustainability in the terms of, we have a car-free challenge, or we have a home energy challenge, because half of our population is renters. It all intersects with inclusion. We need to include everyone. You may not have a car. You should be able to be included in these objectives. You may live in an apartment. The home energy challenge doesn't apply to you. We need to make everyone feel like they're included. And the last one is a service-oriented and responsive government. I think I am the only candidate who can bring that through the cohesion of it's represented through my supporters, lifetime supporters, survivors of domestic violence, lifetime residents, environmental activists. I think I am the one candidate who can bring true cohesion to the ward.
Okay, and I wish we could go for another hour, but
we did it on Friday night. You missed it.
Yeah, there's. In any case, we're not going to go for another hour, and we actually we have a candidate actually waiting on the phone to call in. So for our next segment. So my final question is, given that voters cannot vote all of you into the council seat, I'd like each of you to identify what it is that makes you the very best candidate. And you probably touched on this to some extent already, but focus on what makes you the candidate that voters should choose. And I guess we'll start back with you, Ashley, and come forward.
Sure. I'll go back to the third point I was making about the service-oriented government. And my supporters represent a rich and colorful tapestry that is Ward 2. Some of my first volunteers were 7, 11, and 16-year-olds. Lifetime residents, environmental activists, a woman who raised her grandchildren in Tacoma Park, disability advocates. It's just this wonderful, wonderful and rich tapestry. I also think that what's really needed right now is new ideas, creative ideas, fresh ideas. I know the 911 system has been problematic, but that hasn't, that's not a new manifestation. That's been an 11-year-old problem. I am here to fix problems now. I run this campaign with my husband and my friends and my volunteers. I've knocked every door myself, not my spouse, not my partner, not my volunteers. It's been me. I really think that I represent the true candidate where we can all come together and talk and be inclusive and have real conversations.
Okay, great. Thanks. Joe?
Eric, I might not be known as the least prickly candidate in the Ward 2 election now, and I understand that. But I've shown, despite that, and what matters is that I can get things done. I mean, whether you support the dog park or not, it took us 5 years of effort, 1,500 signatures, and a lot of heavy lifting. And we now have this great community resource that we didn't have before. And I'm the guy that started that effort. And I've done that on roadways issues. I've done that on environmental issues. I've done it on community resources like the dog park. I bring practical solutions to the table and an unending amount of energy to put my shoulder into something. I know also, Eric, that I'm just one vote. Okay, so it's absolutely essential that somebody work with all of their council member colleagues. And I know all of the council members who are going to be on the council, and I've met the new ones, and I'm happy to work with all of them. I'm the action candidate, the guy that'll get things done.
Okay, great. Thanks. Cindy?
Well, so if Joe is the action candidate, I guess that makes me the traction candidate. Because I feel that to take action, you need to bring people along with you. And that's something I excel at and have demonstrated experience in over the years. I have a recipe for being a city council member that's effective and action-oriented. And that would be, first, to listen very closely. 2, to respond and make people feel that they're heard, to include lots of different people. 3, to build common ground, reaching out to all sorts of people. Are there people that have been excluded from the conversation? Absolutely. Is it time to bring them in? Of course. And 4, to make a decision in conjunction with the rest of the city council and the mayor and move on. And finally, step 5, repeat.
Okay, great. Well, thank all of you, and thank you all for taking the time to run for the position of City Council. So. So we're only 16 minutes behind. I will be out of here before 10. So for the next segment is going to be one in which I rely on our great staff members of Tacoma Park City TV. Amy Byrne. Oh, I'm sorry.
Sorry, I thought you got them. I'm her husband, Adam. Just in case technology issues
Okay.
fail, I'm just going to sit here just in case. That's it.
Okay. So just to explain, so Amy Byrne is a challenger for the Ward 5 council seat, and she is with FEMA. She's an employee with FEMA, and she is working in Houston right now, I believe. And I think we have her on the phone. So we'll try that out to see if she can answer through the phone. And Amy, if you are able to hear me, we do have a timer, but I will say stop when your time is up just in case you don't hear the timer. So I guess we need to find out if I need to stop talking and we need to hear from Amy.
Hi, Eric. Can you hear me?
Yes, you're coming through great.
Great. I've been on since the beginning.
I know. I'm sorry about
No, it's been
having
wonderful.
you wait so long. Okay, so Ward 5, Jarrett Smith is the current sitting council member running again for the seat, and Amy Byrne, as I have said, is challenging for that seat. So to begin, I'll put 2 minutes on the clock. And I'd like to hear from each of you why it is that you're running for office and what you feel are the particular challenges of Ward 5. Hold on one second. And
who's first?
Well, Jarrett, because you're in the room, I'll go with you first just and get used to the voice. But Amy, you will go second. So, Jarrett?
All right, thank you, Eric, and I appreciate you hosting this event for us. You've done it every time I've been on the council, and it was time for election year, so thank you. Before I answer your questions, let me talk about tax duplication because, as many of you know, I'm president of the Montgomery County Maryland Municipal League, and there is a deal that we are working on to resolve tax duplication. So our city manager, Susie Ludlow, is going to meet with some of the representatives of the municipalities that are going to be impacted the most in a negative way regarding tax duplication before we meet with County Council member Sidney Katz and have a vote before the membership. Now, let's talk about your questions. First, regarding the issues in Ward 5. Ward 5 is, I would say, has the majority of the apartment stock in the city, and so it is the champion of rent stabilization. But all apartment buildings do not have the same quality. The maintenance is a huge issue, and even those buildings that are owned by nonprofits like CPDC that recently had a renovation at Essex House, lingering issues continue to be a problem. So how do you make sure that rent stabilization works for the residents of Ward 5 and for people all over the city? It's a tough problem because it is not just the city of Tacoma Park that's dealing with it. It is us having to deal with the entire region, right? Washington, D.C. at one time was, if they weren't the leader in rent stabilization or rent control, they were very close to Tacoma Park.
Okay, we'll come back to that question specifically. Your time is up. So, Amy, same question for you. Why are you running for office, and what do you feel are the biggest challenges of your ward?
Well, since moving to Tacoma Park, I've been really dedicated to the city through activism, through working for the city, through support of our firehouse, and even my professional life. I think it's important to have someone who is a renter, who lives in the heart of Ward 5 to represent Ward 5. Because as Jared said, we do have a massive amount of renters, probably the most than any other ward in the city. City Council hasn't had someone who rents in an apartment in a multifamily building on the council for a long time, and I see daily how the lives of renters in Ward 5 are, while very happy, are often a struggle. My community members work long and odd hours, and they just want quality, happy lives in a safe community, but they don't know where to turn to engage. And I think that number one is a problem. My professional life is also my ward. I've been working with CHEER for 2 years now, and CHEER's main...
Oh, we're losing you, Amy. Amy, we're losing you.
Oh, no.
Okay. We may have to go with our relief pitcher. Amy, are you there?
Hi, is this any better?
Okay. Hold on. Okay, go ahead. Try again.
So I guess my point is that I work professionally in the ward. It's over the last 2 years, I have actually been focused heavily on what is needed in the ward. It is actually my job to know what's going on in Ward 5, and a lot of that work is surrounding issues of community engagement, of language barriers, but heavily on housing affordability and housing stability. So for me, I think we need representation that is very visible, and
10 seconds.
I think that's something.
Oh, I just said 10 seconds. So go ahead.
Okay. So I've been heavily working on it. I organized our Flower Hudson Tenant Association, and we've been doing a lot of really great events in our board, and so I just think that we need better engagement and more visibility from our representation, and I think I can offer that.
Okay, thank you very much. Amy, I'm going to ask you the next question, then we'll have Jared answer it after you. It's a question that I asked previously this evening. The council has a tendency to initiate new programs that need more funding, which drives up city taxes, and the examples given were the dog park, Safe Grow, the Flower Avenue Green Street, and election synchronization. How do you square the new programs with rhetoric about making the city affordable?
This is a really good question, and I think it's interesting that in the last few months I've been spending a lot of time talking to people, not just in person, but over email, because I have been in Texas for the last month, and over Twitter. And this is something that I found was really interesting for Ward 5 members particularly, because a lot of the things like the dog park and the library expansion don't really affect a lot of Ward 5 residents. We do have facilities that are actually closer to us that are outside of Tacoma Park. And so for them, it is it's difficult to understand why we are, for them, replicating these services. And so I would suggest that, number one, we do everything we can to stop replicating the services. And also, it would be really great if we could increase our tax base by having the development at the junction, because if we have development there, we will increase our commercial.
Okay, well, that's time in any case. Important. Okay, thank you, Amy. Jarrett?
Thank you. Taxes is always a big issue for the council. Residents come to us when we are considering the budget, and many people do not want us to increase property taxes. That's the primary way that municipalities in the state of Maryland fund their operations. So it's a big question for us when we're up here on the dais. Programs, I'm guilty of asking my colleagues for money to support things like Lunch and Learn and the scholarship program at Montgomery County College. So I think, for wards like 4, 5, and 6, those initiatives are extremely important. So how do you, balance taxes and new programs? I think it's highway user revenue restoration and fixing to tax duplication. That's why I'm working on these two big problems.
All right. Well, let's go to tax duplication, since you were talking about that earlier. Give me 1 second here. And we'll go with you first, Jarrett. Do you feel that the city can do more to reduce or mitigate tax duplication? And that would be taxes that we pay to the city as well as taxes that we pay to the county, and we have an overlap of services.
Right. For this issue to be resolved, it has to come from the county council, because the county council is the one that is holding the money that should go to us and the other 21 cities and towns in Montgomery County. So through the leadership of Susie Ludlow, she has come up with a proposal that, some municipalities in the western part of the county, they bring in a lot of money from their income tax base. And if we go forward with this proposal, they will see less money, but they do not have the needs that we have in a Tacoma Park. There is this deal. We have to see if my colleagues in the other jurisdictions will approve going forward, and then we have to have the GO committee, the Government Operations Committee at the County Council, vote in favor of taking it to the full county council. And I foresee talking to county council member Roger Berliner, who's the president of the council, about bringing it to an up and down vote in the next few months. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And Amy, I'll give you a few more seconds on this question. Do you feel that the city could be doing more to mitigate or eliminate the tax duplication issue?
Well, I do think it's really important that we make sure that our county unfreezes the formula they put in for what they would reimburse to us. That formula was frozen back before the recession, and so we are losing millions of dollars because it doesn't jive with what we're currently giving them. Number two, I think it's important that we actually get from the county what we pay them for. So one of those things is the county inspection for our rental units. That particular service that they offer us is generally a checkboxing or a box checking exercise that doesn't really actually help the quality of our units. And so I think it's really important that we stop spending money on that particular service if we're not actually getting what we're paying for.
Okay, great. Thank you. So, Amy, we've asked several several candidates about the process the city is going through in terms of choosing a new police chief and the possibility of a civilian oversight review board. And I'm wondering whether you feel it's important that there be such a review board in place with the next city police chief, and what you believe are the attributes the city should be looking for in the next police chief. Amy? Did we lose her?
Hi, I'm assuming you wanted me to go first.
Oh, yes. So that's
okay.
To you first.
So I have been really impressed with the initiatives that have come up in the past year out of our police force. The Unity in the Community initiative, the Behind the Badge initiative, the Youth Cadets, the Community Citizens Police force, as well as all of the community engagement that Captain Collington has been doing outside of those initiatives. I know that they are out and about. They're trying to create better relationships between the police force and with the residents, and I think that has already helped increase that trust. So I think any police chief candidate should first and foremost espouse those values that have already been demonstrated by our current police force. They should want to get out into the community and meet the people and get involved and create better recognition. And with that, I think having a civilian review board shouldn't even be an issue. I mean, if they're dedicated to community-oriented relationships, a review board is just an extra opportunity to keep up with good relations.
Okay, great. Thank you. Jared?
Ready?
Yes, I'm ready.
All right, thank you. Yeah, I mean, when it comes to the police force, I'm extremely supportive of community policing. I think that is the future for the relationship. I hope it's the future of the relationships with law enforcement and the residents to live in the cities, towns, counties that they patrol. But what does community policing mean? I mean, it's like the buzzword now that everybody's using. For me, it means that you see more officers getting out of the patrol car, walking a beat, knocking on doors, just having some type of relationship with residents other than when someone calls 911 and the police show up at your house. For people of color, you know, there's always been this questionable relationship between the police department in these communities. There's been a lot of over-policing. There has been a lot of times the police have looked the other way while illicit activity has been going on in the community. So we need to find a way to leverage some of the things that Captain Collington is doing, and I will say for the record that I've helped him get involved in some of these things, like the ACE Academy.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So a question from one of our viewers, do you have a racial equity agenda for Ward 5? And Jared, that goes to you first.
Well, I appreciate the question, and I would also like to state for the record that I was the one who sponsored the racial equity policy. I brought it to the mayor and told her that I was going to bring this to the council, and I asked her if she would co-sponsor it with me. What does racial equity mean? I mean, it's another thing that's coming out there, and I think it comes out of Ferguson, and it started in Seattle with Mayor Nichols signed some policies to make sure government understood before they adopted a new policy, how does that impact people of color? And so that's what we're doing. That's what we're working towards. It's a long process, but what we want to do is, whether it's redeveloping the hospital campus, what happens when the Purple Line station is built at Arliss and Flower Avenue, how these things that are coming from the state, from the government, how they are going to impact people of color.
Okay, thank you. Amy, do you need me to ask the question again?
No, I've got it. So I think Ward 5, along with Ward 6 and Ward 4, really need to have this in place, because we do have such a high proportion of people of color in our communities. In Ward 5 particularly, we have a lot of people who do not speak English or as their first language, that they weren't born here. And so I think for me, one of my top priorities is to ensure that they are being reached out to and engaged with. Tacoma Park has made great strides in ensuring that people who don't speak English are able to read the materials produced by the city, but it kind of stops there. But we do have incredible diversity, and those people, they want to vote, they want to learn how to be advocates for themselves and for their neighbors, and they want to build community. And so I think all of our policies really need to focus on how we can ensure that these people are constantly being talked to, constantly being engaged, and that they are also still continuing to receive the massive amount of services that many of the other wards receive all the time. Again, there's no place for a dog park in Ward 5.
Okay, I think we're losing.
Things are happening.
Yeah, I think we lost the last part of that, Amy.
Oh, okay. Just simply that we need to make sure that we're engaging with people, making sure that the services that are offered in many of the other wards, and that focus of a lot of spending in the other wards is looked at here, which I think is another reason why the Green Street project is really important, because that's environmental justice for people who generally would have not been looked at in other places. Tacoma Park has a value of equity and making sure that all people are included. So we need to make sure that we are reaching out to our immigrant populations, the people who aren't speaking English, and we need to make sure that they know what's going on. We need to go to them, because they don't have the time
Amy,
to come to us.
let me cut you off there, okay? I'm going to ask a question that is in some ways a follow-up, which is you mentioned the Purple Line, and I'm wondering, how you as a city council member would work to maximize the opportunity of the Purple Line and minimize any potential cost to the community. Amy?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Did you get that question? And by costs, I don't mean necessarily financial costs, but
sure.
Maybe the city's commitment to economic and ethnic diversity.
So I think that we have great staff at Tacoma Park who can focus heavily on trying to find people who want to invest in the areas that are surrounding the Piney Branch and University areas. There are four Purple Line stations that are coming into the area that is quite adjacent to Ward 5. And so a lot of the land that's surrounding those areas are up for grabs. So lots of people are holding on them, and they're increasing the land value, which means that whenever someone comes in and purchases that, they're going to push out the residents that are there. and though that economic center it serves our community. So I think that what we need to be doing is really collaborating with Montgomery County and making sure that we are finding people who want to invest in the local community and make sure that the local community continues to represent the community that it is and has been for quite some time. I know that
Thank you.
CHEER, in my work with CHEER, it's something that we are focused heavily on, and we are in talks with trying to find people.
Okay, thank you, Amy.
That.
Okay, thank you. Jarrett, same question. Do you have any concerns about the Purple Line, and how can we maximize the opportunity while reducing any potential threats?
Regarding the Purple Line, when it comes to the market's going to happen. I mean, that's not something we need to be concerned about. What we as elected officials need to focus on is how do we protect affordable housing? And to do that has to be done by the government. I was fortunate enough to be a guest at the HAND conference. That's like the major affordable housing conference in the region. And Mr. Bozzuto, the namesake of Bozzuto, it's a residential developer in the region, said that the only way that you have affordable housing is government has to put money into the projects. And I believe that. So we need to go to the county council, and next year is going to be a very pivotal election for the county executive and the county council itself. And we need to have the county council come in and put real dollars in protecting the units that are going to be impacted by the Purple Line. That's the only way you're going to have people be able to stay in these areas, because rent stabilization is not going to be a policy in Montgomery County, and nor is it going to be a policy in Prince George's County, because Prince George's County has a different feeling when it comes to affordable housing. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, the city of Tacoma Park has made a commitment to be a sanctuary city, and I want to know how you feel about that status. And beyond that, I'm interested in hearing if you think that the city should be doing more in terms of backing up that commitment with policy.
Thank you again, Eric. The sanctuary city policy that the city has, we've been leaders on this issue for a very, very long time. County Council member George Leventhal brought it to the council at the time, and they passed the ordinance that makes Tacoma Park a sanctuary city. I spoke at a CASA event a few months ago about this issue. When President Trump said that he was going to penalize sanctuary cities, the National League of Cities put together a webinar that I sat in on, and this is an issue for municipalities throughout the country. How do you make sure that you protect those people that live in your jurisdiction that need sanctuary status? And the idea of sanctuary cities goes back thousands of years, when religious groups needed protection. So the city needs to do whatever is possible legally to make sure that our sanctuary city policy stays in effect.
Okay, great. Thanks. Amy, do you need me to repeat the question?
No, thank you. So I think that us as a city being a sanctuary city makes me so incredibly proud to live here. When I first moved to the DC area, we were looking for a place to live, and we asked a local about Tacoma Park, and they said, no, you don't want to move there. That's where all the green, socially conscious hippies live. And I just thought, well, that's about the right place for us. Being a sanctuary city means that we are living that socially conscious value that we put out to the world and to the region. And so I think that is invaluable. So we should keep that. But number one, aside from what we've done policy, what we need to be doing is creating a network of support amongst our residents. so that if something does happen where people need help, where people need a place to go, that they know where they can go. We need to make sure that our residents are protected, and because they are valuable to our city and they are valuable to our values. And so I think that that's really important, that we are engaging with them, that we are identifying their needs, and we're identifying people who can be there for them and who can help them.
Okay, great. Thank you. So for my final question, and I'll go to you first, Jarrett, I'd like you to tell us why it is that you are the right candidate. We can't elect both of you. So why are you the right person for this position at this time?
First, I'd like to say it's a pleasure to represent the residents of Ward 5 and the city as a whole. You know, in this position, I get to travel around the state and sometimes the country and talk to people about some of the great things that we're doing here in Tacoma Park. I want to continue to lead on big issues like the redevelopment of the Flower Avenue Green Street project. I would like to see what is going to happen with the hospital campus. I don't think we have put the resources in to determine the future of that incredible institution that has been a part of the city for 100 years. And the Purple Line, I mean, it has incredible potential, but it also might change the character of the city. And what mechanisms can we put in place to protect the character and what we think is important to Tacoma Park? So those are just some of the things that I think are really important, but also capacity building. How do you get people that live in the apartment buildings to participate in local government? It's not as simple as just information. You can give people information all day long, but we are such a diverse community that people's view of the government is not the same as if you were born and raised in America. And a number of people, when you say you're the government and you're coming, people want to immediately walk the other way. And they do not want to have any conversations with you, and they do not believe that you are there to help them. So how do we change that perception of us? And I think it starts with city staff going and almost acting as ambassadors to the council, to residents in the apartment buildings, and knocking on doors and telling people the services that are provided by the city. And that was something that was an initiative a number of years ago. Thank you.
All right, great. Thank you. Amy, what is it that makes you the right candidate at this moment for Ward 5?
So I've been living in the same exact apartment in the middle of Ward 5 since I moved here 6 years ago. And I have seen very little change in the ward. But I have found that the more I've lived there, the more I've learned about what's going on and how important it is to be engaged with the people who are in the community. I think I am the right person for this at this time for this ward, because my focus is on Ward 5, because I want to make sure that Ward 5 is never forgotten, that I am constantly in the community, or that we have people who are constantly in the community who want to be active leaders. And it doesn't need to just be me, it needs to be everyone who wants to make a difference. So I know that I've already started doing a lot of that. I organized the Flower Hudson Tenant Association. We've been putting on a lot of community events because unlike other parts of Tacoma Park, we don't have public events where everyone shows up. So we've been doing a lot of work in making sure that people are engaged. And yes, maybe people are scared of the government, but they're not scared of their neighbor. And I know that my community...
Okay, we're losing you, Amy.
...their neighbor.
Amy? Okay, well, I think that might be it. But I will say that, first of all, I've been informed that Jarrett's sign is incorrect up here, so I apologize for that.
It happens.
But you are running for Ward 5, not Ward 4. And I also want, this would be a good time to say that we are planning to have a Ward 5 discussion next week, a forum next week at 7 o'clock on Monday, I believe, at Columbia Union College, and I will be sending out more information about the room and so forth.
Well, let me correct you, Eric.
Okay, thank you for correcting me.
They want to be known as Washington Vintage University now.
So I've been here too long. Washington Adventist
University. Yes.
So
I don't want any phone calls or emails.
But Amy will be at that event in person, and so if it's a little challenging tonight with the phone in, but we'll have both candidates in person at Washington Adventist University next Monday at 7 o'clock. Stay tuned, and I'll be sending out social media about the room.
And I know Amy's very excited to actually be there in person rather than having me sitting up here, because I'm glad I didn't just have to sit here like this.
All right. So thank all three of you. We're now only 20 minutes late, but it's the final act of the evening.
No idea where to sit.
So I think they have you figured out. You're here.
Okay. Yes.
Okay. So we conclude this evening with the candidates for Ward 6. Both are challengers for a open seat. Talisha Searcy and Jason Small, welcome.
Thank you.
And I had the pleasure to talk to both of you last week. If you listened to Talk of Tacoma on the radio, instead of going to Tacoma Park Represent, then you heard both of those interviews. So why don't we start, as I have been starting, with you telling us a little bit about why you're running for office and what you see as the biggest challenges. And I'll give each of you 2 minutes, and start with you, Talisha.
Perfect. Again, my name is Talisha Searcy. I am the former president of the New Hampshire Gardens Community Association. I served in that role for 2 years. I want to run because I care about Ward 6 and every aspect of it. I care about the residents. I care about making sure that residents in Ward 6 feel as if they have a voice and they are connected to the larger city of Tacoma Park, which in many instances they felt disconnected. I care about so many things that are happening in our ward. It's going to be critical that we focus on particularly the Tacoma Langley Crossroads area and the impact that the Purple Line may have, the recreation center and the redevelopment of the rec, which is such a vital asset to our community, making sure that residents in Ward 6 have that city facility that represents the city that it loves and supports financially through its taxes. It's also important to make sure that we have engagement. There are a number of residents in Ward 6 who don't speak English as their first language. They're immigrants, and they don't know who to call when things happen. They don't trust the police. They don't report crimes. They don't know how to reach out. And I want to be that vehicle to bridge the gap between Ward 6 and the city of Tacoma Park. Thank you.
Great. Thank you.
Well, I am.
Yes, Jason. Oh.
I am running for the council seat for Ward 6 for, in large part, the same reasons that Talisha has outlined. And so I'd imagine that there's probably a lot of ways in which our answers are not going to be all that different. But one of the things that I would say about it is that having been in the ward for a long time, my wife bought the property that we currently live in 2001. I effectively have been living there since 2003. And I have seen and witnessed a lot of different things about not only the representation that we've had, both good and bad, in the ward, but the diversity and the opportunities that our ward brings to Tacoma Park that aren't necessarily always reciprocated by the larger Tacoma Park community. And I think that oftentimes what we end up having is that a lot of the reputation about Tacoma Park and being affordable, and the reputation about Tacoma Park and being diverse, and the reputation about Tacoma Park and being a kind of a city where everyone can feel welcome and invited is born on the backs of Ward 6. And we haven't always seen the same sort of spirit engendered by the rest of the Tacoma Park community toward us. And so I think that one of the reasons why I'm running right now is because I want to be kind of the person that is there to speak truth to power on some of these issues, and to be there as someone who has dealt with some of these issues in a very sophisticated manner, both at a professional level and at an intellectual and personal level.
Great, thank you. Jason, I'm going to follow up on your comment about Ward 6 being in many ways a primary economic, not in many ways, a primary economic engine for the city. And I'd like to hear your views on appropriate development and where you think the city may be failing and where you think the city should move forward in terms of proper development in that ward.
Well, if I'm being honest about that, I think one of the greatest ironies about this whole issue with the Tacoma Junction development has been that that geographically it's not that big of a place. It may happen to be in the center of Ward 2, but in reality, or in Ward 3, I'm sorry. But in reality, most of the economic tax base or the business tax base that's available to Tacoma Park is actually in Ward 6. And so to have seen so much of the emphasis be placed on places where we're not necessarily looking towards the kinds of things that we could be doing in Ward 6, and some of the emphasis about micro growth and small development and taking into consideration local and community ideas in development not being replicated in the area where most of the opportunity to do that would be has been kind of a frustration for me for a long time. If I was going to add one thing, I would say that those New Hampshire Avenue signs have been up for a very long time, and we haven't seen very much new along the New Hampshire Avenue corridor.
Okay, great. Thank you. Talisha?
I'm assuming same question.
Yes. Oh, yes.
No problem.
Let me. Yes. So same question.
So I kind of want to piggyback off of some of the points that that Jason raised. It's a fact. Ward 6 is one of the, if not the major, economic engine for the city of Tacoma Park. What's going to be important for us going forward is understanding the direct impact that the Purple Line will have. It's not something that's going to happen in the future. It is happening now. If you ride on University Boulevard up near Piney Branch, the signs are up. It's here. So now what we have to do is figure out the right path forward to ensure that we meet multiple goals. We need to organize small, local, ethnic businesses in the Crossroads area to fully understand what they need, to fully understand and ensure that in future development, they're not left behind. We need to work with the rental community that's currently in the Crossroads area to ensure that there is affordable housing that is built, that if we are taking a mixed-use approach, that it doesn't result in a net loss of affordable housing.
Thank you. We'll come back to the Purple Line.
Yep.
But I actually want to follow up on, and I heard a voice from the audience, so we'll just follow up on that voice. So the Taco Bell issue, which was moved from the location of the transit center up to the location on Holton Lane. And I'm wondering if you feel that the city has acted appropriately and if it listened to residents on that issue. And I'm sorry, Talisha.
No problem. As the president of the New Hampshire Gardens Community Association, I took a very active role in first convening residents to understand the issues of the Taco Bell. I had meetings with the developer and residents in our area. I issued a survey to residents in New Hampshire Gardens to understand what their concerns were about the Taco Bell development. And I really tried to reach those people who did not want to go on the listserv and say publicly that they liked Taco Bell, which was a problem. One of the big things that was important for people to understand is that the zoning for that lot really held a lot of folks' hands. Our hands were somewhat tied in terms of what we were able to do. But the information that I was able to gather, the information that I was able to communicate, the point that people were concerned about litter, the point that people were concerned about traffic, the point that people were concerned about what it means for development in the future actually led to change in the site plan. And it is still being changed right today. The State Highway Administration is still working on the intersection at Holton Lane.
Okay. Thank you. I'll give you a few more seconds, Jason.
Well, I think that if you look at the sector plan that kind of governs the, at least the Montgomery County side of the Tacoma Crossroads development issue, a lot of the things that it talks about in there are about walkability and sustainable development and bringing some sort of an urban density that would promote those kinds of walkable, safe spaces. And I do understand that, having a state highway run right through the middle of it makes it a little bit more of a complicated issue. But in large part, the reality that I knew, and at least the neighbors that were around me knew, was that it seemed as if there was more of an emphasis on making sure that we had some sort of franchise, large-scale developer come in there than to take advantage of what the previously articulated planning for the area was, and that was to bring in something that would be an anchor for the community that currently existed there.
Okay, and I want to kind of keep following up on some of some of these questions because it seems like these are unique to Ward 6. So, fittingly, the business district at New Hampshire and University is the Crossroads. Crossroads Development Authority, right? Mm-hmm. You're at a crossroads. You have multiple jurisdictions along all sides of, or three sides of your ward. So, can you talk about maybe some of the issues that residents of that ward face because of that, and how the Purple Line may impact Tacoma Park? How would you deal with that impact?
Well, I think that there are a couple of things that come to mind immediately about that. One being that when you deal with a cross-jurisdictional community, the lines that exist there are not the same to the community as they are to the jurisdictions that operate in those areas. And so for us, as residents of Ward 6, that area means something completely different than it might mean to the municipalities and the counties that are in control of those spaces. I think that one of the great things about the Purple Line coming in, regardless of how people feel about it in other places along the line, is that it does bring some connectivity to an area and to a group of people that historically got left out of that kind of choice towards connectivity when Langley Park had a reputation for being one kind of a town, or when Tacoma Park was in large part split between Prince George's County and Montgomery County. And so, to me, I think the most important thing is that we need to work cross-jurisdictionally with both the county representatives and the city representatives to really emphasize that we all need to be at the table if we're going to make decisions that are going to affect everyone positively.
Okay, great. Talisha?
Great. Currently, there is a lack of coordination. It's not in that area involving Prince George's County, bringing Montgomery County. People need to remember that we're talking about State Highway, and we're also talking about Maryland Transit, two different agencies. And trying to bring all of those folks together. I've had long conversations with Melanie Isis, who's over the CDA over there, has been a problem. And it continues to be a problem. And as a result, we're left with an area in which people don't, or jurisdictions are not taking ownership of their respective parcels of land. It also results in the potential for there to be lack of coordination, lack of consistent messaging when the purple line comes through. We want to make sure that everyone that has a stake in Ward 6 are on the same page when we're faced with development.
Great, thank you. Another issue that you'll be dealing with is the Recreation Center. And I'm wondering if you would share your vision for the Recreation Center and give us some indication of how you will fight for funding to see your vision come to fruition. Talisha.
Great. I am personally so invested in the success of the Recreation Center. It is such a resource for the community. We've used it as a space to have community meetings. The kids in my family that are at Tacoma Middle are constantly there playing basketball. It is critically important that we understand, and we've done lots of work within the city to understand what people want, but two, turn the proposals that have been received into a really constructive process, engaging Ward 6 residents that are going to definitely take advantage of the rec center once built, and then to go a step further and hold whoever we select to develop that parcel accountable to answering to the needs of the residents of Ward 6. It's going to be mission critical for whoever is selected in this position to be hands-on in terms of meeting the needs of the residents, getting them here to learn more about the proposals, and actually holding developers' feet to the fire to ensure that we get what we need.
Great. Thank you. Jason?
Well, I think in a couple of ways, the rec center on New Hampshire Avenue really provides a real opportunity for Tacoma Park to kind of live up to some of the things about community that are supposedly component parts of the values of being here. I think a lot of times what we end up seeing is that there is an opportunity for a lot of interaction and activity that could be driven through that facility that would inspire and develop the community and the sense of community for the entire town of Tacoma or city of Tacoma Park to meet the needs of both the residents that are immediately there and expand its footprint and the services that it provides. I think that one of the things that we've always seen, or at least in my experience that I've always seen, is that having the opportunity for people to come together in sport and in community activities and things is one of the ways in which you bridge gaps. And having a space that promotes all of those things to people is something that I think would be in vital interest to all of us. I don't think you're going to find a lot of disagreement between the two of us on that issue.
Okay, great. I guess, not to be divisive at all, but, when I interviewed both of you this past week, each of you used the phrase redheaded stepchild in reference to Ward 6. And so I guess I'm wondering,
That's awesome.
and this...
I like redheaded people.
I am redheaded.
And you both have really addressed this already, but are there ways in which Ward 6, which both of you have expressed, is often left out of the the public imagination of Tacoma Park? How can the issues and the life of Ward 6 be further brought into the life of the entire city? And Talisha, I think I've forgotten. Just Talisha, take it away.
I think there's a couple of things that will need to happen. Number one is prioritizing Ward 6 issues. That's first and foremost. I spoke to the co-op board yesterday, and I'm still alive, which is great. But one of the things that I stressed is, the Tacoma Junction is great, and the co-op is great. But the fact of the matter is, many Ward 6 residents don't frequent the Tacoma Junction, and the more time and effort, the more we're at a stalemate, means the less time we have to devote to what we need to get done in Ward 6, which is another huge part of the puzzle that is the city of Tacoma Park. We have to engage. We have to reach people where they are. We have to have more events. We have to support the events that we have. I went to the Diwali Festival, a beautiful event. How can we support those things and those activities that are happening in Ward 6 to get people from all over the city to participate?
Great. Jason?
I do think, I think that as we look at the way Ward 6 has been treated by the rest of Tacoma Park, I don't think that it's an issue of previous representation or anything like that. But I do think that there is kind of a perception along and among the other parts of Tacoma Park that somehow maybe the history of being aligned with Prince George's County or having New Hampshire Avenue where it is has affected the collective consciousness of some of the other wards. But I would hazard a guess that there's probably a lot of people that are in other parts of Tacoma Park that don't even realize that Tacoma Park goes past New Hampshire Avenue. And so for people who are in Hillwood Manor and people who are in other places along the corridor, that there are ample opportunities for everyone to consider the entire depth and breadth of Tacoma Park as Tacoma Park, and that if we look at the New Hampshire Gardens area and the Hillwood Manor area and the apartment complexes as a part of the city instead of the thing that makes us diverse, then I think we'll all be better off.
Okay. Jason, do you believe that, or do you agree with the city's policies regarding sanctuary city and refugee welcoming? And do you feel the city could be doing more to bolster its commitment?
I am both in favor of the sanctuary city policy for Tacoma Park, and I do think, all things considered, that we have a lot of rhetorical heft behind the things that we say about our immigrant policies and our welcoming nature for immigrant communities. My wife is an immigrant. I am happily married into an immigrant family, and I do think that one of the things that people, again, don't notice about Ward 6 is that there is a strong and vibrant immigrant community within Tacoma Park that is resilient and has always been there. I think also that we can do even more to consider and make sure that we don't have the intrusions from the federal government into our policing, and that we ensure that when we bring in a new police chief, that we keep the police power out of our immigration policy within Tacoma Park, because all that does is produce negative outcomes.
Great. Thank you. Talisha?
It's wonderful that we are a sanctuary city. Is something that I value in a way that you would never know. However, it's not enough to just say you're a sanctuary city. You have to be out there. You have to communicate what that means to people who don't speak the language, are new to this country, are just fighting to survive. You know, pushing a a cart with tamales that they're selling on the side of New Hampshire Avenue, right? How do you reach those people? How do you make sure that people understand that it is safe to report crimes here? How do you let people know that they can vote in city elections here? So having the forefront, being at the forefront of communicating that we're a sanctuary city is important, but it's also going to take being in Ward 6, reaching those residents, translating documents, shaking hands, letting people know that we're here for you. And you don't have to fear, no matter what some people may say in the world, that we're here for you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Talisha, not only as a representative of members of voters in your ward, but how will you be a leader for youth in your ward?
Oh, gosh, that's a wonderful question. So folks who don't know my story, I am the product of a single parent household. A lot of people know my mom. She makes awesome chili. My father was incarcerated as a child. And so for me, I want to be that example for young kids in our area who may not immediately see themselves in a position like this, you know, to let them know that I am like you and you can do it. You can run for an elected position. You can go to college. You can succeed. And that's how I want to reach youth, by serving as an example. I have been canvassing bus stops, Blair bus stops in Ward 6 at 6:45 a.m. You must bring food in order to get them to wake up enough to listen to you. But it's been one of the most rewarding experiences that I've had during this campaign, to have kids look at me and say, oh, I didn't know that. I'll tell my mom. That's what I want to be for the youth in Ward 6.
Great, thank you. And Jason, how will you be a leader for youth in Ward 6 and throughout the city?
Well, I think when I think about my own experience in growing up and being the beneficiary of two civil rights era parents, my mother spent every day of my life from second grade on listening to Martin Luther King speeches in the car. Every time we went anywhere, it was on a modified 8-track player in our car. So there was never a time in my life where I didn't conceive of my future as being involved in public service or trying to be a role model to people. And even when that means standing up to dominant paradigms of nihilism and denying who you may be or who you might be able to become, because it's not necessarily hip or cool to be smart or hip or cool to be well-spoken or any of those kinds of things. And so I think that I've tried to spend every day of my life as an example to my own children, and as an example to the community around me. Part of the reason why I took the job that I have currently as town administrator in Capitol Heights, Maryland, is to prove the point that everybody deserves good government, that everybody deserves the opportunity to succeed, and being a resident of an interior Beltway community doesn't mean that you are any less than anybody else. And so if the accolades that I've achieved in my life or the pedigree that comes with them can bring any sort of import or benefit to the community, then that's what I would do.
Great, thank you. And I forgot to turn the...
It's all good.
Late.
Yeah.
So
that's what happens when you're in Ward 6. You end up last. Nobody respects us. You know, so.
All right. Well, just two more questions. And so, as I've said to all of the other contested races, we can't elect both of you. So I have two questions to try to get to distinguishing characteristics. So first of all, and, you could totally agree on these, I don't know, but what is it that that you would make the priority in your, first term in office? And Jason, we'll start with you.
I think that the first priority of my first term in office would be to see a philosophy of community benefit agreements be implemented with regards to developing along the New Hampshire Avenue corridor. And I think the second priority would be to have the city put some real heft behind a study of the impacts of the Purple Line on the community that is Ward 6 on both sides of New Hampshire Avenue. I think the third thing would be to try to really deal with the issues of policing and accountability for the visibility and safety of the residents, because I think that's one of the main concerns that people have when I've been speaking to them, and that if we can deal with issues of livability in Ward 6, then we will be a long way down the road at trying to make everybody better.
Great, thank you. Talisha?
Great. My first priority will be engagement. Whoever is elected can't do this alone. It's going to take the brain power of the residents within the ward. It's going to take people showing up. It's going to take people speaking up to get things done. So that's first and foremost what I want to do. Second, it's about convening. Getting all of those jurisdictions we talked about earlier, getting the renter communities to the table, getting the small local businesses to the table so that we can really develop an action plan for what we want to see as a result of the Purple Line development coming through. Another major priority for me is the recreation center. I can't stress it enough. I want to see the rec center flourish. It is a priority of mine. I care about the kids that are in Ward 6 and that section of the city, and they need a safe place to be. Thank you.
Thank you. And so my final question is, what is it in your background or in your makeup that uniquely qualifies you to be an effective city council member? I'll start with you, Talisha.
First, I have a fire. I have a passion for the community. I love where I live. I've lived other places that are constantly named, Bethesda, Silver Spring, and I chose Tacoma Park. Second, I'm a doer. I don't sit back and just send emails. I actually get out in the community and I do. If it means cutting grass and trimming around signs, if it means staying up late and going to Sam's Club to make sure that we have supplies for a fall harvest that, fingers crossed, someone shows up to, that's what I do. Because I care enough about our ward and I care enough about the people in it. Lastly, I know how to listen and constructively lead in terms of coming up with practical next steps, practical courses of action. We could talk about ideals all day long, but at the end of the day, we have to reach a point where we could take incremental steps forward. A dream is not realized overnight. It takes time. And I want to do all of that as your next city council member, I guess, for Ward 6. It's late, y'all. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Jason?
I think that part of being a good council person and being a representative is being willing to be the person that is unafraid to speak truth to power. I think it's also very important to be the kind of person who is willing to listen to the voices of the people who may not necessarily be experts or may not think that they are as valuable as the decision makers tend to think that they are. And really articulate their voices and their opinions as we move forward. For myself, I think I've never had a problem with being a gadfly. I've never had a problem with being involved in public service, and I think I've been wrestling with the issues that affect Tacoma Park my whole life. It's the reason why I came here from the Midwest, and I think that as we move forward and think about these things, that having and adding that gravitas to the issues is something that I could bring to the table.
Okay, great. Thank you. Why don't you stay here for a minute? We'll just wrap up. I want to thank everybody who stuck with us through this entire forum. It could have gone longer. You could have asked more questions, but I think
you didn't.
but I think that we had a good representation. I feel inspired. I feel very pleased to be a citizen of Tacoma Park, and happy that we have so many high quality individuals who are stepping forward to represent us. So I just want to once again thank Tacoma Park City TV for their work tonight, and at so many events and City Council throughout the year. I want to again thank Jesse Carpenter, and I actually want to thank all of the candidates for public office by name. That's Kate Stewart, Peter Kovar, Casey Kostiak, Terry Siemens, Cindy Dybala, Joe Edgell, Ashley Nugent, Jarrett Smith, Amy Byrne, Talisha Searcy, and Jason Small. They run for office, so I don't have to. So thank you so much. And vote on November 7th.
We want affordable housing in this area, in this building, to continue. So unless the